Welcome back after our break, and I just want to welcome the people at home that are watching. We do apologize that we had some technical problems this morning and weren't able to record or to live stream the first portion of our budget meeting. However, we are now back up and running, and welcome to those that are watching and those that will watch at a later time. So just to bring everybody up to speed, we're currently on page 32. If you're following at home of the presentation that's being presented to us by our financial people. And having said that, we will move on. And on page 32, community economic development. And who wants to start from here?
Through your worship, I'll just start briefly. If we could try to slowly work through some of these breakdown slides, I think it may alleviate some of the questions that are coming up in bulk. So if we have specific questions on those slides, but it may shake out answers in the following ones as well. So if we get to the end of the department and there's still outstanding questions, it might be beneficial to ask those at that point, but through the slides, it may actually prompt answers to some of the questions that have been asked, okay?
Yeah, and I'm sure you'll let us know if it's going to be on, say, slide 34, 35, that question, we may want to wait till we get to on page 35 because it may answer our questions. So we'll get through it. So let's plug on here. Page 32. Is Alan or Nathan would like to speak to that?
Through your worship. So we've kind of touched on slide 32 already. So that was community economic development in its entirety. Slide 33 was the overview of that that department as a whole. And then if we move on to slide 34, that's where we break down it into the cost centers of that department. So communications is where we would pick up the conversation. If
Great.
there's specific questions about that particular budget, we can take those now.
Okay, so we're now on page 34. Is there anything on page 34 headed up as communications that anybody would like to ask or questions of staff with respect to this slide here? Knowing farewell, we could come back to it if we need to. So, yeah, Councillor Pennell.
Thank you, Worship. Can I just make a statement of how refreshing the new website is? Thank you.
Yep, thanks, Councillor Pennell. Is there anything else with respect to the communications slide here? Seeing none, moving on to page 35, community programs. Who would like to comment about that? Is there anything to comment, newsworthy, etc.?
Through your worship, I can make a few small comments. The biggest increase is contracted services. That's not actually an increase overall, it's just shifting. We shifted where booking was, what GL had hit essentially. So it's just been adjusted there. That's the biggest increase. And then, and it was mentioned previously, we did leave a contingency in place of the pickleball rent at the old arena, just the unknown that still remains with that. So there is still some funds there in place of what may occur in the future here until there's a solution provided.
Great, thanks, Nathan. Is there any questions or comments with respect to the slide on page 35? Councillor Hicks.
Through you, your worship. Annie, just the day camp, is that the summer day camp that is run by, is it, yep, Boys and Girls Club?
Yes.
Yes, okay, thanks. That's all I needed to know. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, thanks, Councillor Hicks. Is there anything else on that slide? Seeing none, moving on to page 36, public celebrations.
Through your worship, the biggest reduction here is that revenue. And I think I misspoke earlier. I said government grants. It was donations that were reduced, not the actual grants themselves. It was donations. So that's where we're seeing that. Certain events maybe used to have significant amount of donations. We've seen that reduce years past. So we're just adjusting that to be more accurate with what we're seeing year over year now. Sorry.
Great, thanks, Nathan. Is there any questions, comments, or concerns with page 36, the public celebration slide? Seeing none, moving on to page 37, titled Downtown Core.
Through your worship, to avoid any confusion on this, what is included in this slide is banners for the downtown core. There's $2,500 allocated for garbage replacement. So that's two, essentially. I think they're 1,000 a piece. So two and a half. I know you can't replace a half one, but that's kind of the contingency we have. Beautification at $12,000. That's for the whole municipality, though. We're just keeping it in here because that's the bulk of it, as well as the contracted services is the garbage bin collection. So the cost of that, that bin for the year. So we've moved that out of Public Works to where it sat previously and shifted it to the downtown core. That's why there's no increase here. We're just adjusting, or I guess there's a $2,000 increase, assuming the fees are going to go up, but that's where that move is made from.
Great, thanks. Is there any questions or comments with respect to the downtown core slide? Yep, go ahead, Councillor Shank, and I got to remind you just to you push your button there. Thanks.
So to pick up garbage downtown costs $22,000 a year, correct? I'm reading that correctly.
Your worship, that is just the bin cost. That's not the wages or the equipment time. That is strictly just the bin tipping. I believe it's called the tipping fees associated with having the bin, but yes.
Thanks, Councillor Shank. Is there any other questions or comments with respect to this slide? Seeing none, moving on to page 38, Parks and Facilities Overview. And I see Mr. Brown's coming up to the front.
As Chris gets settled in here, through your worship, I'll just make mention. So I know a few councillors have emailed and asked for some clarification on the wages. In the past, we'd moved away from splitting them out into each cost center. But as you compare actuals throughout the year, you're not seeing what the actual true cost of it is compared to the budget. What I've tried to do this year is allocate based on the finalized 22 numbers. So moving forward, when we're looking at the cost centers individually, we can say, okay, we actually budgeted this amount. Was it accurate or not? Are we putting more wages in this year over year? Is the service being used more, whatever? So some of those wage numbers aren't, I don't want to say they're accurate, but at least a starting point for us to move forward with. And then when we're comparing next year, we'll hopefully have a clearer picture on what we're actually allocating wages to cost centers. So when we're going through the slides, for instance, on the next slide, you'll see the difference between the SPC this year and last year. When we're looking budget to budget, it's excluding the wages piece because to factor in the $650,000 increase that the wages are included in that is not true reflection of the increase in the cost of the facility. I just wanted to clarify that as we go through. So I believe that's the case for Parks and Facilities and then Public Works as well. Those are the two mainly affected by this.
Okay, thanks, Nathan. With respect to the Parks and Facilities overview, is there any questions or comments with respect to any of the numbers or the presentation at all with respect to that? Seeing none, moving on to page 39, Facilities SPC. And Nathan, did you want to comment or Chris want to comment on that before we get talking about it?
Thank you, Your Worship. So we're going to get into a number of slides here where we talk about each individual facility, the parks, and the different parts that make up that entire overview that we just looked at. I don't want to, read the slide verbatim, but there are some comments under each slide. So we can go each individual slide, look for questions on each facility, and I can just make a few comments. Obviously, when we're looking at the SPC, we currently run the 2 ice pads 8 months a year. We go down to 1 pad for a couple months, and then the other 2 months of the year, there is no ice in the facility. Obviously, if we wanted to keep ice in longer or more months of the year, there would be a substantial cost to that. It is harder to keep ice in the rink in the summer months. Right now, we don't have ice in June and July. The facility has the full rented lease spaces. We are fully occupied in that regard right now. And as we talked about before, we're looking at more and more revenue streams in terms of advertising and naming rights and things like that.
Great, thank you, Mr. Brown. Is there any questions or comments for Chris with respect to the facilities, the SPC facility in particular on slide or on page 39? Yep, go ahead, Councillor Shank, then I'll go to Councillor Cornell. We got to get you pushed. We get you.
So if I read this correctly, we lost $702,988 in the SPC.
Counselor Pennell.
Thank you, Worship, through you. Chris, earlier in the presentation, we saw that $150,000 was going to the SBC reserve. What's making up the rest of it to bring it to 217.5?
Through your worship, that is the offset expense. So the 217,000, if you look to, oh, I guess it's split out here. Sorry, it's not. It's on the previous slide, the ICE user surcharge, that's 67,500. That's the offset account that'll be going to reserve for that surcharge. So the revenue hits, we have the offsetting expense to budget that to go to reserve. So it'll be 150 plus the 67,500. So that makes up the difference on reserve contribution.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Counselor Pennell. Is there any other questions with respect to the slide on page 39, Facilities SBC? Seeing none, we move on to the next slide, and I guess the next slide is just the breakdown from the slide before. Am I correct there?
Yeah, Your Worship, we just wanted to break down what makes up some of those larger numbers in materials and supplies and contracted services, things that aren't exactly our staff's expertise, or we just contract that out to make sure that it's getting done.
Great, thanks, Chris. Is there any questions with respect to page 40? Seeing none, Facilities Town Hall on page 41.
So we're just seeing a reduction from last year. We know that Town Hall, there's no staff working out of here on a day-to-day basis. We were able to lower some materials and supplies, and contracted services stayed pretty much steady. But we are looking to invest in this building, and we would do that through a lot of the capital improvements as they come forward.
Great, thanks, Chris. Is there any questions with respect to the Facilities Town Hall on page 41? Counselor Hicks.
Through you, your worship. So where would the painting, the exterior paintwork that we're looking at, where does that fall in? Does it fall under Facilities Town Hall, or because we got no grant for that? So it's under grants? It's under capital? Sorry.
So through your worship to Councillor Hicks, so that would be, yeah, a capital improvement. And there was money budgeted for that last year, and it'd still be there. So we would looking to use that money budgeted to help us with the grant applications to get more.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hicks. And Mr. Brown, is there anything else with respect to page 41? Seeing none, moving on to Facilities Market Square properties.
So we've grouped these just to fit on the one slide, 11, 12, and 13 Market Square. As we know, 12 and 13 Market Square are now vacant. So there's no tenants in 13 Market Square anymore. 12 is a former staff building. 11 Market Square still does have a tenant. So we were able to save a substantial amount of operating costs on these buildings. That obviously could change with what happens with the sale of some of these properties. But for now, these are the numbers that we're looking at.
Thanks, Chris. Is there any questions or comments with respect to the slide that's on page 42? Seeing none, Facilities Train Station.
So just looking at the slide, Via Rail, they pay the town annually one payment for revenue. The wages and benefits, that's our staff time to go there, fix up anything that might need to be done, and also to clean the waiting room. Obviously, we know like a lot of these our heating costs and things like that have gone up, and we can't really control that. Those contracted services, we have spent a good chunk of money fixing up the train station. We've installed a new intrusion alarm, surveillance cameras, and also the automated door control, so we can lock it and unlock it remotely based on the train schedule and when passengers would be using the waiting room. So those contracted services, insurance, obviously one, but alarm systems is a big one. And then our, HVAC preventative maintenance and ESA inspections and things like that. The service level is kind of set by VIA, right? So we know what we need to do based on our contract with VIA. So there's not a ton of wiggle room there. We do know that the building has been hit with a lot of vandalism over the years. But with our investment in the alarm system and surveillance cameras, we're hoping to limit some of that. And we've also introduced a new vandalism budget just to help capture some of those real costs of what it costs the municipality when things get damaged for no reason.
Great, thanks, Chris. Go ahead, Councilor Pennell.
Thank you, Worship, through you. Chris, I noticed in 2023, the revenue was 7315 and increases to 7500 for 2014. Is this going to climb up for next year as well, or is this a set rate now at the 75?
So we do have a contract with VIA and it was just renewed. And so I'd have to look at those terms exactly. I don't have the numbers, how much it increases year by year, right on the top of my head, but we do have a set contract with VIA.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Is there any other questions or comments with respect to the train station? Councilor Martin.
It just seems, I know our former CAO said that they were negotiating with VIA for a new contract. It just seems like we put a lot of money into that, and they're not paying very much in rent on that. Is that the revenue? That's their total rental, I take it. Yeah. And they only went up $185 from the previous contract per year. And
Yes. Yeah, through your worship, Councilor Martin. Yes. What you've said is 100% true. We've always felt that we were definitely cost us more to operate that building for what we were getting in revenue for sure. But it is providing a service to our residents, and we're working diligently to try and get it reopened. Obviously, with the issues we've had with the network, we haven't been able to get the new door control system online yet. But we're going to do that immediately, and then we're going to monitor very closely, the people that are in and out of there. Are they passengers? Are there people just walking by? Are they creating damage? And monitor it very closely so that we can try to keep the cost of keeping the building open very limited.
Yep, go ahead.
yeah, you make a good point, Chris, about providing a service to the residents. Who contacts VIA? Do you negotiate with VIA at all yourself, or does
So-
the CAO, or who does?
Yes.
Along with those negotiations, I wonder if there was any talk of, providing more stops and thus providing more service to the residents of Napanee. So along with, if we're providing them something at a reduced cost so we can provide residents with a place to go inside, I'm just wondering if the talks also include more stops at the train station.
Yeah, so through your worship, I wasn't directly involved with the negotiations, but I was definitely providing background on the building and our operating costs. The former CAO was involved. We had discussed how much or how many times the train stops. Right now, the train is stopping 5 times a day, but it doesn't stop if there's no one on the train that has a ticket for Napanee, right? So it could only stop once or twice a day, but it has the ability to stop 5 times a day. So we're working towards having the building open for that timing of the train stopping, but locked up, overnight and in between those stops to try and limit some of that damage. I don't know if Jessica wants to add anything more to that. I know you have probably a better understanding of the agreement right now, but I do want to say that part of their negotiations was making sure that we did invest some money into the building, fix it up, and make sure that it's safe place for their passengers to wait for the train or wait for their ride after they get off the train, and we've done that. So I'm not sure if Jessica wants to add anything on that note.
Through your worship, I wouldn't get too far into the details of the discussions with VIA. I would just note that we were in a position with more to lose in the discussions with them, because their alternative, if we did not do the repairs, was to say, well, the train could just not stop there anymore then. So just realizing that as was stated earlier, that this is a service to residents, and we believe it's an important service to residents that the train does stop here. I don't know if that helps at all.
Thank you, Jessica. And thank you, Chris.
Just to follow up a little bit on that, Bill, and I just don't know if, I think I know where you're heading, is that there was a dedicated line that stopped there, and VIA has decided that it's not efficient, I guess, to have that dedicated line. There are some outside agencies and outside people that are working to try and bring that line back. But that is obviously a business decision of VIA as far as having, it's kind of like the milk run. It would stop on a regular basis all along there. So there is some rumblings out there. I just don't know how far they've gone with it. So again, but that's a decision of a business decision of VIA to decide whether or not they're going to reinstitute. I think it was line 615, maybe 652. So thanks, Councilor Brunel. So is there anything else with respect? Go ahead, Councilor Brunel.
Thank you, Worship. Through you, Chris, this page is for the whole train station, yet it's my belief that VIA is only using a portion of it. So the costs associated that I'm looking for is for the whole building, and we have that given out in kind or something for other places, right? So for us to look at these figures and see that the revenue doesn't really justify it, but it's the other part of the train station as well as we have to think about that we're doing for the community as well.
Correct. Yeah. And just to Councillor Pennell's point, the west side of the train station is occupied by Morningstar Mission, and the east side by VIA. So we do have two groups in the train station.
And just to confirm for all of this cost that we have here.
Correct. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Is there anything else with respect to the train station on page 43? Seeing none. Facilities 99 advance on page 44.
Through your worship, not a ton to add. Still working through the most efficient way to operate in 99 advance. We have several contracted services in there. The big one being the facility cleaning company. Materials and supplies with heat and hydro. It's a large building, obviously. So those costs we're actually able to decrease from last year's budget. And the revenue, of course, is those lease payments from our tenants that occupy the space with us.
Thanks, Chris. Is there any questions or comments with respect to 909 advance on page 44? Seeing none, moving on to facilities, the Selby Hall.
Thank you, Your Worship. So a lot of these community halls will have the very similar materials and supplies and contracted services. Where they would differ a little bit in revenue in terms of how busy they are. We have in wages and benefits that is our facilities cleaner and maintenance group going in there, not on a daily basis, but most days going in there, making sure it's clean and tidy, replacing light bulbs, fixing things that break down. So that's what the wages and benefits are. We were able to decrease a little bit on materials and supplies and contracted services. So we were able to save a little bit, but basically status quo from last year.
Great, thanks. Any questions with respect to the Selby Hall? Seeing none, moving on to the North Fred Hall on page 46.
So again, wages represent that internal facility staffing allocation, materials and supplies, utilities costs, a maintenance budget, as well as cleaning supplies, bathroom stock. North Fred Hall is getting used in the summertime very well with the day camp there with the Boys and Girls Club. And so it's a busy place. And our cleaners down there before the kids arrive pretty much every day. Contracted services, same as a lot of the other buildings. Insurance is a huge one. Alarm monitoring, fire inspections, ESA, HVAC, preventative maintenance. We've upgraded our HVAC there at North Fred Hall already. So things are performing well. And there's not a ton in terms of service level reduction options available here because that hall is being used quite a bit.
Great, thanks, Chris. Any questions with respect to the North Fred Hall? Seeing none, moving on to the South Fred Hall on page 47.
Again, with South Fred, very minor change, a little bit more than last year. The revenue, there is the hall rental plus the bar sales. Wages represent our cleaner and maintenance person again. Materials and supplies, maintenance budget, utility costs. We are finding it, we do still burn oil there at South Fred. So it's sometimes a little bit more costly to heat that building than some of our other facilities that have natural gas or propane. Contracted services, more of the same as the other buildings. Happy to take questions.
Are there any questions? Go ahead, Councillor Hicks.
Through you, this may pertain more to operating, but it would be a capital investment. So, and also insurance cost. So do we pay a higher insurance premium on that building because we heat with oil? Because I know we did in a residential sense.
Through you to Councillor Hicks, I'm not certain of that, but I would expect that, yes, that is the case, just given that it is indeed oil, so that would likely be the case.
Great, thanks. Is there any other questions with respect to the South Fred Hall? Seeing none, moving on to Facilities Library on page 48.
Yeah, I won't go into it in too much detail, pretty much the same as last year. The county runs the library services out of the building that we own, and so it is our obligation to maintain the building. And we have a really good working relationship with the county staff there.
Great, thanks, Chris. Is there any questions or comments with respect to the library? Seeing none, moving on to Parks and Facilities Admin.
So here's where you'll find in the materials and supplies lines where you see a combination of the memberships that we're a part of, the training for our staff, licensing for different programs, meeting expenses for those various staff across the entire Parks and Facilities departments. Contracted services contains a portion of that town's online booking software that we have, booking that Annie was referring to earlier.
Great, thanks, Chris. Is there any questions with respect to page 49? And I know that it's going to get broken down here in the slides following, so any of those questions may get answered, but we're more than welcome to put them out there right now. Seeing none, moving on to page 50, Parks.
Thank you, Your Worship. So Parks, this page basically covers all of our parks and green spaces in one spot. So this is every park that we have, every green space that we have, all the places that we maintain in the summertime cutting grass. I know it's noted here, obviously fuel and vehicle expenses hit in this area. So we do have an increase from last year, and I'm happy to take questions if you have them.
Go ahead, Councillor Pennell.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Chris. I noticed it on the very next page coming up was ball diamonds, but my question is, some places we have parks with a ball diamond. So have you split this in, have you divided the two? Like, for instance, if I was at South Fred and there's a ball diamond and yet there's the soccer and there's play structure and that sort of stuff, how did you work that out into this budget for us?
Yeah, so how it works is in our operations, we have a ball diamond crew, and they're responsible for the ball diamonds themselves. The grooming, the lining, the changes to distances and bases, staffing tournaments, all those things. Parks is, we have two crews. We have a crew that mows the grass and trims in the rural part of town. We have a crew in town. And so what we try to do is if a crew is going out to do the ball diamond in, say, Roblin, we would have them cut the grass in the park, or if the crew was coming out to cut the park, we'd have them cut the outside or the outfield grass at the ball diamond. So what we try to do is make sure we're not making two trips to the same location. If the ball diamond crew has to go there to groom the diamond, line it out for a game that night, and the grass needs to be cut, they would cut it at the same time. So we try to make, we do merge them a little bit, but ball diamonds is more focused on the actual ball diamond itself, and then parks is more focused on the, you know, the areas with picnic tables and green space and playgrounds and places like that.
Okay, thanks. But so would there be a division in the next 2 pages from separating the ball diamonds, even though we're there cutting the grass? You would calculate cutting the park or whatever's right next to it differently than adding that to the same
So yeah,
account, GL level, I guess?
Yeah, so to answer your question, yes, we separate that, and we're not double expensing ourselves for maintaining those areas. So the ball diamond crew, which you'll see in the next slide, they have their own budget, and then the parks crews have this budget to work with in terms of expenses.
Okay, great, thank you.
Great, thanks. Is there any further questions before we move on to the ball diamond slide? Go ahead, Councillor Shank.
Chris, last year, it says here, you currently attempt to cut every property at least once. And now last year we had a ton of rain, so therefore probably you were hard pressed to keep up. But on a normal year, do we need as much staff as we have? And can we get away and not cutting it once a week? I know in the spring of the year when it's going, but later on in the summertime when things dry up, do we need as much staff? Is there any way that we could cut staff there?
Through your worship. So what we were trying to do and continue to work towards this is really lay out our service levels for each type of property that we're cutting. You know, we would like to cut sports fields twice a week, and we would like to make sure that our main parks are cut maybe more often than some of our green spaces that aren't used as much. And so we want to identify what those service levels are for each kind of property. Certainly when the students arrive in May, we're not able to cut each property once a week, especially if we get a rain day or two in there. But yes, as the summer goes on, generally the grass starts to slow down and then we can get caught up. But in the past few summers, it hasn't, we've been cutting right into past when the students leave. And when the students leave, that's why we do have a few seasonal employees, because they stay, because that's the same time of year that we're trying to get the rinks both back going. And this is the same staff that runs the arenas. So I would say our staffing levels are pretty much bang on to what we need. And of course, there's a lot of other things that come up during the summer where we have to pull people from those mow crews. There might be a mow crew that normally has 4 people. They might be down to 3 or 2, and those staff members are deployed doing something else. Maybe they're fixing a dock, or maybe they're working a ball tournament on the weekend. But I would say our staffing levels are pretty good for the services that we're providing right now.
Great, thanks. Is there anything else with respect to parks before we move on to the ball diamonds? I think we probably covered most of it, but we'll stop there anyways, just in case, on page 51, ball diamonds.
Yeah, so a small increase in ball diamonds this year. One thing that we've been trying to work towards with the ball diamonds is continually getting more of the, it's called Washington ball mix, and it's a red clay mix. And we're trying to top up our diamonds with that. It holds moisture a lot better. We've already completed the Fairgrounds diamonds and one of the North Fred diamonds. We're going to continue to work towards that so we can get that type of material on all of our diamonds. What happens over time is as you groom them, you see the dust fly behind the machine, and that literally, you're basically just blowing away, right? And so you do need to top up your infield material from time to time. We haven't done a great job of keeping on top of that over the years. And so we do want to continue to add that clay, that red clay mix onto our infields, and just by chipping away at it. And so that would fall under that materials and supplies line there. We have decreased it, but just want to kind of let council know how we're working towards making those fields better, especially in the rural parts of town.
Great, thanks, Chris. Is there any questions or comments with respect to ball diamonds? Yep, go ahead, Mike.
So Chris, the the Dorland ball field, if you can't put the clay there, is there any way of getting a bobcat or something in there? Because right at the infield, you have that lip. So when a ball's hit and you go to catch that ball, and if it happens in that lip, you don't know if it's going up, down, 90 degrees, which way it's going. Just to scuff off that the lip that occurs when the infield is not kept up.
Yeah, through your worship. So we've actually had a lot of discussions on Dorland. Because we haven't added material to the infield in a long time, that's what creates that lip, because the outfield is now higher than where the dirt used to be. And so what we'd like to do is exactly that: get a skid steer with a bucket, scrape off that fine dust that's on the infield now, and then top that up with this red clay, and make it a more firm infield, and also level that up with where the grass is. And yeah, take out that lip to start and then fill that back in.
All I was suggesting, Chris, is if you can't afford to do that to that field, that at least that lip gets knocked off. That's all.
It sounds like staff is all over that. So, yep, appreciate that. Thank you. Is there anything else with respect to ball diamonds? Seeing none, parks, boat launches.
So for boat launches, you can see we have decreased it from last year. I did want to note in this slide that this is for the town's 4 municipally owned boat launches. The budget supports our staff putting in the docks, taking those docks out, portables at these locations. But what it doesn't really support is improvements to those ramps, the roadways leading up to those launches, or the docks themselves. And there's limited opportunity here for new signage, money box upgrades, new garbage cans, and things like that. So I just want to make sure that it's clear that that's not a lot of money. So this is the money that would support what we have now, but it doesn't really support, drastic improvements over the course of the year.
Great, thanks. Is there any questions with respect to the boat launches? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Cower.
Yeah, Chris, a couple of times sitting here, we've heard talk about the lifts and stuff for the kayaks. Did we ever purchase or acquire any of them? That's going back probably 4 years now.
Through your worship, we have not acquired any of those. We submitted 3 separate grant applications on those, and we're unsuccessful in all 3, unfortunately. But that is something we have looked into in the past, but haven't been successful.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is Councillor Hicks, then I'll go to Councillor Pennell.
Just through you, your worship. So Chris, Cuthell Lane Boat Launch is the only one that's getting any sort of capital improvement this year. Is that correct?
That one was presented. It doesn't look like it's still on there. So I think that one will have to wait till a later date unless council decides that it's important for this year.
Didn't mean to get your hopes up. I was looking at the wrong slide. Sorry.
Councillor Pennell.
Thank you, Worship. Through you, Chris, you were talking about minimum amount of monies available for cash boxes and signs and stuff like this. So something that possibly that we could look at this year, so that we could maybe discuss it for next year's budget, is a pay app on your phone, that sort of thing. And this is maybe something that we could incorporate not only for the 4 boat ramps that we use, that we own, but also the dockage at conservation, the hydro, and any other parking that we might be charging for. That's something I'd like to put on the wish list for next year, if we could, please.
Thanks, Councillor Pennell. I think it's been duly noted. Is there anything else with respect to boat launches? Seeing none, moving on to the splash pad on page 53.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the bulk of this budget item is the water services, the water charges. Again, if you wanted to save money on this, you would have to look at adjusting that service level. So currently, our splash pad is open 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. from the beginning of June until the end of September. We have taken lots of community feedback. We did adjust those times. It used to be 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. A lot of the families with younger children suggested we maybe open it an hour earlier so that they could get there early, especially on those hot days, and get their activities out of the way before lunch. So we did adjust that without changing the service level because the time is still the same. But then we did have some feedback as well to say we'd like it still open until 8. So if we were to go 9 a.m. to 8 p.m., that's actually adding an hour each day, and which would obviously constitute more water charges. So council could look at that. We do feel that it is a good time, 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. The tricky thing about the water charges is that it doesn't matter if one person is there or if 50 people are there, it's an activation button. And so you activate it, it goes through its cycles, and the same amount of water is coming out no matter how many people are actually present there.
Great, thanks, Chris. Is there any questions or comments? Go ahead, Councillor Pennell.
Thank you, Worship, through you. Chris, with you mentioning that, do we have any way to measure what the usage is during the week or month or anything along those lines?
So to my knowledge, just our water meters. I'm not sure how frequently they're being checked, but we could maybe try to dive in to see like what times a day are more. But essentially, we're just getting a water bill just like anyone in town would.
Sorry, with my nature, I didn't quite be so clear. I meant for people.
For
But
people?
But I appreciate that answer too. But for usage of residents going there, is there some way of measuring what the usage of residents are?
Yeah, so I think we could just do an internal sort of audit where staff are going there, checking in, doing kind of a head count periodically, whether that's 4 times a day or twice a day. We already have staff there in the morning before it opens, getting it all ready and cleaned up. So we could do a check kind of when it opens to see how many residents are there. And then we could have people come back and do head counts at different times of the day. I would think that would be the only way to really capture a true, assessment of how busy it is.
So I guess it would be pretty easy to do it in the morning when you open and at night. And I guess really, again, I should be more clear on it, is it's the 8 o'clock thing that, if you're there at 7 to shut it down or whatever, if people are still there, then you could see if there's still usage at that time. But as you say, if there's only a couple people, then it's, the offset is huge, right? So.
Yes, and to your worship, what I really liked about going to the 7 p.m. close, we were getting the alarm calls after 8 o'clock. The doors are on a lock schedule as well, and so when the splash pad would close at 8, the doors would lock automatically at 8:45 just to give some people time to change and move on. But we were seeing when those doors locked, people were still kind of around, didn't realize that it was on an automatic timer, so we were having to send staff back. So what we liked about that is sometimes the people hanging around there at night they don't always have the best intentions. And so I did like moving that closing time to 7 p.m. for that reason. We did see less vandalism in that washroom building at the splash pad because of that. Whether that we can sustain that, I hope so. But that would be one thing I would consider. The later you keep it open, sometimes the more nuisance things that happen in that area.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hicks.
Through you, your worship, just on the subject of doing head counts, would it be possible to put a QR code? Maybe this is a question for Kylie. There where somebody can just, scan the QR and type in 3 people. We don't even need names or anything, and it would give us maybe an idea of how many people are using it as far as families or kids go.
We can look into that.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Hicks. If it's any advantage or any help to council, I know I've been there a number of times through the week with my granddaughter, and it is a very busy little spot, especially as the weather gets hotter. I think Mr. Brown's on the right path here with the 9 to 7. I know there was maybe 1 or 2 times last summer that something had happened that the water wasn't on or didn't, and I was made aware of it. So anyways, I think it's a facility it's well worth the money that we're putting into it, and it's very busy. So I think we're on the right trail there. So, but is there anything that come out of my comments that anybody would like to comment on? Seeing none, we'll move on to page 54, cemeteries.
So we saw a reduction in cost to the municipality in the cemetery budget. So it's laid out there. There are some comments below. Materials and supplies relate to staff operations, supplies, fuel, and equipment maintenance to operate the 3 active cemeteries. Contracted services are mainly related to burials completed by a third party. As active cemeteries are given up in local boards, the municipality is legislatively required to operate them. So we don't have a ton of wiggle room there. Adjustment to service level would come through staffing allocation, which would decrease the appearance and the response time to cemetery operations. I think over the last couple of years, we've made huge strides in our cemeteries and the care of them, and we're going to continue to improve that. Obviously, the more and more that we do, the more kind of hands we need to help. But for now, we saw a reduction compared to last year. And if there's any questions on cemetery operations, I'd be happy to answer.
Thanks, Chris. Any questions with respect to cemeteries? Seeing none, we'll move on to building, page 55.
Through your worship, as Michael's walking up here, I'll just make a reminder comment here. So as mentioned earlier, we did shift some expenses as well as some salary allocation to the building department from the earlier meeting. So that just gives more of a true cost, and that transfer to reserve is related to the projected surplus in the building department. So once we have that reserve set up, we have the obligation to transfer it out, and it only can be used for future deficits in the building department. So that's the intent there. So it shouldn't affect tax base moving forward.
Great, thanks, Nathan. Go ahead, Michael. Is there anything you'd like to add to this slide with respect to building?
I don't think there's a whole lot to add. I think we've got a pretty good base, or we will have a pretty good base to that reserve fund here after this year. So as Mr. Murphy mentioned, I think we'll have, we shouldn't have any impact to the tax base moving forward. There will be ins and outs over time from that reserve, but I think with that good baseline, we shouldn't be really hitting the tax base on a year-to-year basis there. So happy to answer any questions that council might have.
Great, thanks, Michael. And I should have mentioned, I guess, slide 50 or page 55 is related to page 56, so maybe we can lump the two of them in together. If there's any questions with respect to the numbers that are on page 55 or the statements that are on page 56, we'll entertain them now. If there's nothing, we will move on to planning. And again, it's page 57, 58, I guess, that they're sort of linked together there. So.
Yes, thank you, Worship. So we are projecting a little less revenue in this year, just given current interest rates, lack of interest in creating new lots via consent or severance in the rural area. There hasn't been nearly as much activity on that front in the last year to year and a half, just given raising rates and properties starting to sit a little bit longer. So most of the revenue in planning has come from those smaller scale residential applications being severances. So we're projecting a downtick there with a balance of commercial and industrial site plan related applications coming in the door. And as Mr. Murphy mentioned, we did reallocate half an FTE out of planning into building. So it's a better balance of how we're actually utilizing those staff members, and this reflects that. Slight increase to contracted services. So as we're getting through our official plan update, which I spoke to at the last council meeting, pushing to have that in place by the end of this calendar year, I'd like to start our zoning bylaw update more or less at the tail end of that, so that once we get a good comfort level from council, that staff can start updating our zoning bylaw to reflect the changes in the official plan. So slight increase there anticipated to assist staff with getting that in place. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Nobes. Is there any question from Mr. Nobes with respect to these two pages regarding the planning? Go ahead, Councillor Shank.
Hey, Mike. I'll be good. The only reason why I'm just trying to figure out this, because you have a budgetary constraints and stuff like this that you have in here, but there's a line that it says the building department is now treated as a separate business unit. It does not affect the tax base. Tax rate, tax base, either. So you're revenue neutral.
On building alone, planning is not the case.
Okay.
We would have to substantially increase fees to get fully revenue neutral in planning. It's very commonplace for most municipalities to have a large strain on their tax base from the planning side. We're very lean in that regard. So I'm comfortable with these numbers today.
Yes, I agree with you, but you know what? You're not costing the taxpayers money on this, on that end of it. So I thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shank. I know it's hard to imagine that we get excited about being revenue neutral, but we do. So is there any other questions or comments with respect to the planning slides? Seeing none, moving on to solid waste collection, page 59. And I think Miss Kelly will be coming up for that one.
Through your worship, as Christy makes her way up here, I'm sure we've discussed this ad nauseum at this point, but just so everyone's aware, the collection slide is the combination of admin, garbage disposal, and recycling disposal. So it's the combination of all three, just so everybody's aware.
Thank
And
you.
leaf and brush as well, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. I was thinking we could, I think it's best we'll deal with page 59 because it always garners conversation. And then we'll separate it and talk about South Fred and the Roblin dump. So welcome, Christy. The floor is yours.
So just a couple of quick notes to add here. The revenue increase you see here is specifically around the special tax levy and an increase in bag tag sales we've already seen so far this year. The wages and benefits, it's noted below, but the significant increase there is regarding the public works staff time allocated to assisting at our waste disposal sites. So specifically, well, they assist at both sites with pushbacks for leaf and brush materials, but at the South Fredericksburg site, they are responsible for the covering and pushbacks of the actual landfill portion. So they spend a significant amount of time there. Materials and supplies. We increased that slightly for additional bag tags we needed to purchase in 2024. And also we increased our advertising. Historically, that was included in a different budget. And now that's in our department. Were there any questions on that slide before we move on?
Do we have any questions for Christy? I see Councillor Pennell's got his hand up, so.
Thank you, Worship. Through you, I have a couple of questions, if that's okay. Christy, you mentioned that the revenue was a combination, and you said there was a tax-based levy on there. What was the tax-based levy? Is that what you said to us?
That is the special tax levy for the curbside collection of garbage and recycling.
Okay, thank you. When are we going to know more about the recycling? When the costs are burdened by the manufacturer?
So that will take place in 2025, 2026. We expect before the end of Q1, you will have a report before you to give you some more details. We're working behind the scenes on that.
Is that
Sorry, Q1, Q2 of this year?
Sorry, before the end of Q1 of this year, yes, you will have a report before you.
Great, thank you. Are we expecting to see a reduction in the cost when that's gone?
So through you, yes, in short, yes. The way that's going to look is that the municipality will no longer be responsible for the curbside collection of recycling in our community. There's some decisions that council will have to make around certain user groups and such. But essentially the residential recycling collection will no longer be responsible or the fees associated with it will no longer be bared by the town.
Great, thank you.
The end of, go ahead, Councillor Shank.
Okay, Chrissy. So therefore, nobody puts out any recyclables anymore because it's not, the taxpayer doesn't have to pay for recycling. So we're going to take the The cost of that, so what happens when they put out recycling? They won't be putting out recycling because that's a service that we're not offering right now?
Sorry.
At that time? when it
Sorry,
comes
through
to
you.
price?
I should have been a little clearer there. The province or their counterparts are going to be responsible for that. So they will take over. It's a bit of a gray area as of right now. I don't know if they would use our current contractor, but they will be looking after the curbside collection for recycling only and all of the fees associated with that. So the plan is that our residents will see no change in service level. They will still have the same recycling collection as it is now or very similar, but the town would no longer be responsible for that.
Yep, go ahead, Councillor Shank.
I'm sorry, it's probably in here, but I have, there's so much data that you have to understand. So how much does it cost us how much will it save the municipality then in 25, 26 of recycling? When you contract the solid waste and it's a 10-year contract, so we automatically out of that contract for the recycling side, or are we stuck with them for the full 10 years now?
So through you, there's some decisions that council have to make, and we can go into that in more detail in a separate meeting. If that's okay, yes. It doesn't affect this budget.
It will be a welcome report to see by the end of Q1 or Q2, Christy. I'll be quite honest with you. So, yeah. Is there any other questions or comments with respect to waste collection before we get to the dumps? Go ahead, Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, and just a comment really. At that time, when recycling is no longer a cost to the town, that's when we need to reduce our garbage and get more into recycling. So we need to have incentives for people to recycle, not decentives. That's all I wanted to add.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Is there anything else? Seeing none, let's move on to solid waste South Fred.
So just a few notes on the South Fredericksburg site. The revenue we decreased this year, and this is just simply based on actuals we're seeing. Historically, we've kind of budgeted a bit high for revenue, and we wanted to be a bit more conservative and in hopes that we would be more on target. I mean, certainly we could bring in more revenue than we've budgeted, but we feel comfortable with where we're at here. The materials and supplies has adjusted slightly. We increased, we're projecting to increase rentals to look at a different, maybe potentially a different equipment to cover the landfill a bit, to get us a bit more compaction there. And the contracted services it includes our leaf and brush grinding and our contract to remove the waste and recycling through the transfer station. I guess I should note that the 2024 budget is showing that the South Fredericksburg site is operating at a loss. This isn't typical of the South Fred site. I think this is primarily based on us adjusting those revenues. So again, we hope that we'll be a little less of a loss or potentially in the plus based on what we could potentially bring in revenue. But I think as we move forward, we'll have to consider a fee review for the sites and that sort of thing. But historically, the site averages about $30,000 in revenue each year.
Thanks, Christy. Is there any questions or comments with respect to the slide on page 60, solid waste South Fred?
Through you, if I may, just before we get there, we were asked to kind of give some considerations on how we could adjust the budget and that sort of thing. So there is a note here that we could consider adjusting the hours of operation for that specific site. However, based on the usage at that site, we don't recommend it at this time.
Great, thanks, Christy. I think Councillor Hicks may have a question.
I did, through you, Your Worship. Christy, the contracted services, does that include Public Works? Did I hear earlier that Public Works does the compaction and the?
So through you, yes.
Thank you.
The Public Works does do our covering and at the landfill and our pushbacks. We've put that in the, it's incorporated in kind of the general costs and not specific to the site. But the contracted services here are just for our leaf and brush grinding and for our waste management fees for the transfer station.
Thanks, Councillor Shank. Then I'll go to Councillor Pennell.
Are we gonna go to a cashless system there?
Through you, Your Worship, that is something we are looking at and exploring. There are some constraints with the current setup and lack of internet and that sort of thing, but it's certainly something we can look at moving forward.
Don't we have, is that not a Rogers Tower or Bell Tower right there?
There's a communications tower on site. That's
Yeah, I'm not
that's
sure
correct.
whose it is, but there is one.
And then within a kilometer away, you've got a Rogers Tower there too. So I know, I know I have debit machines that are wireless, and if I can get it in Adolphustown, or my nearest one, I just think that the way today's society's going and everybody's carrying their debit card and everything else, this is just another way to have more of a accurate, you know.
I know that it is used in other municipalities, one of which I own property in, so it seems to work all right once you get used to it. So, is there, I think we had a question from Councillor Pennell.
Thank you, Worship, through you. Christy, what's the average lifespan that we have on SOFRED again?
Through you, I don't have it right in front of me. I would say approximately 38 years based on the average usage at the landfill portion of the site. That could be adjusted depending, on a number of things. It could expand longer if we continue to divert things from the landfill, or it could, if things got in there that could affect our groundwater and monitoring, that sort of thing, we could, they could tell us to close it in the not so near future, so.
Okay, thank you. And one of the things that we've heard from you before is that we could probably add life to it as well if we compacted it more heavily as well.
That is correct. Currently, we're using a dozer out there on the site for covering the landfill to meet our environmental compliance approval requirements, though we're not gaining much compaction there. So as mentioned earlier, we did increase the rental budget slightly this year to look at maybe potentially larger equipment renting, but in the long term, we may be looking at more of a capital purchase to assist us with those compactions.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. Is there any other questions with respect to the South Fred landfill before we move to the Roblin one? Seeing none, moving on to page 61, the Roblin solid waste site.
So again, the Roblin site's showing a decrease in revenue. This is strictly based on usage and actuals. So we're seeing a decrease in usage at that site, and we've decreased the revenue to try to get us better to that target. We're also showing a decrease in contracted services. This is for our tipping fees for the transfer station, and again, this is a direct result of the decrease in usage. There's less volume going into the transfer station there. And then as potential adjustments to service level, we've included a potential reduction in the current hours of operation. So we could look at reducing, currently it's only open every Saturday. We could reduce that to every other Saturday or something along those lines. However, staff feel that would really only reduce the wages because if the site's open, we would probably still see people bringing materials there, though less frequently, similar volumes. And then another option would be the full closure of the site. It could save, this is approximately 56,000. I do not think that included staff wages, so we could be looking at upwards of another $20,000 there. If I have that correct.
No, I think it does.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
It could. It could be a seamless closure because we've already put significant capital expense there in closing and capping the actual landfill portion, so it's only a transfer station at this time. But we would still have the monitoring for that site, so we have sampling and monitoring requirements of that closed landfill. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thanks, Christy. Is there any questions with respect to Roblin, page 61, solid waste? Go ahead, Councillor Shank.
Oh, I was wondering if you wanted to make a brief comment on that one.
I don't believe at this point. I mean, I can, but I think at this point, I don't think there is an option with respect to closing it, as far as I'm concerned. Anyways, at this point, I think we need to do a little more research with respect to that before we move forward with that. So it may be something we may want to look at next year, but we may have some more information prior to then that'll help us make that decision. So if there's nothing else, we can move on to solid waste Water Street.
So through you, this is pretty straightforward. We haven't changed anything from 2023 in terms of the budget. So this is specifically for the monitoring of a closed landfill site at Water Street. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Go ahead, Councillor Purnell.
Thank you, Worship. Through you, Christy, is this an ongoing thing for the rest of eternity?
Through your worship, very likely. So we're working with the ministry to create a formal monitoring plan for the future. So right now, this is what we have budgeted based on our current monitoring, their sampling and monitoring, and how we're reporting that. But it is likely that it would be very similar moving forward, but it is in the ministry's hands at this point.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anything further for the Water Street solid waste, page 62? Seeing none, moving on to page 63, Public Works overview. Thanks, Christy. And I see Mr. Cuthell coming up.
Through your worship, as Jeff makes his way up here, I just want to point out on the overview slide, the difference between the last year's to this year's shows 635,000. 300,000 of that is directly related to that reserve contribution. So that fleet reserve contribution we discussed earlier is directly in there. So I want to make sure everyone's aware of that. It just seemed like the most logical place to put it in operations to keep it moving forward, given that Public Works houses most of our fleet. Same logic applies too for wages on the breakout slides by cost center. Tried to get a rough estimate based on 2022's actuals to move forward and allocate to each cost center so we can kind of compare budget to budget more accurately and budget to actuals moving forward. So I'll leave it to Jeff to go through the cost centers themselves, but I just wanted to add those comments before we got into it.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Nathan. And I think, Jeff, this one is it the same? We've got the Public Works overview and then it gets broken down in the slides to follow. So more than welcome to entertain questions, but they may get answered as we go down through the slides. So the floor is yours. Thanks.
Correct, Your Worship. Yes, so if there's any questions on the broad overview here, if not, we can just jump down and come back to this slide or hopefully answer your questions in the future slides. Next slide.
I think we have a question from Councillor Purnell first.
Thank you, Worship. Through you, Nathan, you and I had a talk about wages. When I was adding up the wages, there was 472 I couldn't find.
Through your worship, and this came up in earlier conversation when Councillor Shank brought up the county roads agreement. So that TAC agreement, it covers off our portion of wages. So those have been allocated out to, you'll see like we have winter control, traffic operations, whatever it may be on the town side. We also have those mirrored accounts on the county side. It's offset by that grant that we received for them. So there is a discrepancy between the total. In hindsight, I should have added a slide that was just the county portion as a total, but rather than breaking out literally another 15 cost centers, I just left it as is. But that's that discrepancy that Councillor Purnell's mentioning. So they are captured in the overview. It gets absorbed in the grant that we get as an offset to that.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. If there's nothing else, Jeff, we can move on, I think, to page 64, I guess, where we're start. Public Works admin.
Yeah, so Public Works admin, this account, the materials and supplies, generally are made up by utility maintenance expenses related to the main public works barn on Highway 2. Others that make up this amount is vehicle licensing, department-wide tools and supplies and safety equipment. Also contains expenses such as all the training, certification, and safety clothing expenses for all staff. Contracted services is, as written here, 90% made up of insurance, and then alarm systems, ESA inspections, engineering services, department-wide rentals.
Is there any questions or comments with respect to this slide? Seeing none, moving on to Public Works garages, page
Public Works
65.
garages is, these are our two satellite yards that ran, one in Selby and the other being in South Fredericksburg. These are the better deploy our trucks, reduce the cycle time for coming back to our main yard to fill up with sand and salt materials and better manage our loads. Others here, just heat and hydro. Contracted services is mainly insurance.
Great, thanks. Is there any questions or comments with respect to this slide? Seeing none, on to Public Works vehicle maintenance.
This is the new cost center that was created this year. As Nathan had already touched on, we brought in, as of now, a wholesome, they account for all the costs pertaining to our vehicles. So our two mechanics' wages will be out of here, all of our fuel, oil and lube, and all maintenance costs that pertain to the vehicles. And there has been some changes to the way we're going to allocate all the costs to each individual vehicle, as Councillor Shank had brought up before. This will more accurately allow us to at any time pull up a cost of what a specific vehicle is costing us in repairs and fuel. And then also the creation of the $300,000 contribution to reserves. This is hopefully working towards paying ourselves for the use of our vehicles. Then as a vehicle reaches its end of life or hours allotment, hopefully the monies would be there for a replacement vehicle.
Great, thanks. Is there any questions or comments? Go ahead, Councillor Pennell.
Thank you, Worship. Through you, Jeff, where do we find such items as parts for vehicles and tires and all expensive parts? Where do we see that in the budget?
It would be tracked under the maintenance line item on this slide.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks. Is there any other further comments or questions? If not, we'll move on to Public Works roadside brush and tree removal.
The Public Works, this here slide is, there is an increase of 25,000 in the contracted services. This is mostly to address the emerald ash borer and the removal, to try and get a hold on that before we start seeing ash trees hit the ground in the next few years. Outside of that is the wages and benefits, and you'll see that cost center being allocated. The wages and benefits being allocated to each cost center. It will fluctuate year to year depending on where we're putting more of our efforts.
Great, thanks. Is there any questions or comments with respect to the brushing and tree removal? Councillor Hicks.
It's not, sorry, thank you, Your Worship. It's not so much about budget, but are you tracking the number of ash trees that are taken down? I'm just wondering if anyone's collecting any of that information from municipalities.
Through your worship, we are in a sense, we do have sporadic data all over the place. No, not specifically. We haven't been in the past because there's just different areas where they get taken down through a capital project but we do have areas where we've gone out and counted and marked trees on various roads. So we do have some data there, but is it wholesome? I don't believe so.
Thanks. Is there any other questions with respect to this slide? Seeing none, moving on to Public Works hardtop, page 68.
Probably Works hardtop. Again, the materials and supplies here would be, this is the purchase of hot mix pavement for any patching or repairs that are done in-house. And then the contracted services is, that is for line painting contract for all the roads that happens in the spring and fall, and also for contracted services for road cut repairs and such.
Great, thanks. Is there any questions or comments with respect to Public Works hardtop? Seeing none, moving on to bridges and culverts.
So the bridges and culverts, again, the materials and supplies, this would be mainly for any cross culverts or bridge repairs that are minor in nature. And then the contracted services is for a joint tender with the County of Lennox and Yankton and other lower tier municipalities. That $2,500 is just for Spalding bridge repairs for pressure washing and sealing of the concrete.
Great, thanks. Jeff, is there any questions or comments with respect to this slide? Seeing none, moving on to patching and crack sealing.
Patching, crack sealing. Materials line here is the purchase. This is the purchase of our cold mix. This is the year-round patch. Majority of this patch is used in the winter months, spring and fall. And then the hot mix we generally use as much as we can in the summer months. The contracted services here is for a crack sealing program that we hope to really get up and running a more robust program this year.
Great, thanks. Is there any questions or comments with respect to this slide? Councillor Patel.
Thank you, Worship, through you, Jeff. So we're doing the hot patch, hole patching ourselves now with the new machine we have.
Correct.
Is there any room moving forward to do our own crack sealing?
Through your worship, we're exploring it. I'm hesitant. There's an opportunity we have to that we've explored and met with various contractors at the end of the year last year. And I think to slowly move into it, I'd like to say yes and jump right into it, but it takes quite a bit of staff to do it and run proper traffic control. And the machine is quite costly. It would range anywhere probably $100,000 to $150,000 to purchase the machine. We're exploring all options. We're hoping to do a hybrid this year where we can do all the traffic control and put any extra manpower on, but maybe in some sense just having the staff come down to actually run the machine and buy the product. But we're looking at the most cheapest way to get into this because the crack sealing per meter costs, they've just gone through the roof in the last 5 years. So trying to find a cheaper way to get into it because the benefits of doing it are very great. They really expand the life of the road surface.
Thank you. That's what I was wondering, like, other than the outlay of $150,000 for the machine, once we have that, but you're saying that crack sealing is really expensive. So it'd be nice to be able to review whether we could do that in-house other than the outlay of the machine, much like what we're doing with the hot patch as well. So that may be something we could look into.
For sure. And that's what we hope to explore this year and just having our staff be involved in the process throughout and see if it's something we could bring in-house.
Great, thank you.
Great, thanks. Is there any other questions or comments with respect to this slide? Seeing none, I think we'll get a couple more slides in here and then I think we're going to have to take a break. So we've been at this a little better than 2 hours now. So shoulder maintenance and ditching.
Yes, the shoulder maintenance and ditching. This is mostly this is your ditching running parallel to your roads, entrance culverts and ditch cleanouts that we do annually. Minor shoulder repairs. We don't have a lot of asphalt roads with shoulders on them, but this cost center would address all of those costs.
Great, thanks. Is there any questions with respect to the ditching and the shoulder maintenance? Seeing none, Public Works sweeping. Looks like this one should be
This
fairly
one's- Yeah,
straightforward.
this is just the staff allocation for wages to be in the sweeper and have it mobile.
Are there any questions or comments? Councillor Pennell.
Thank you, Worship, through you. Jeff, just a comment, and maybe you can help me out a little bit on this, but we did see throughout the town during the leaf collection and such, the sweeper was out quite a bit. And I had a conversation that I just want maybe people to understand and at home as well, is that was mainly to make sure that the drains were clear. Maybe you could just speak a little bit on that, because I have had people ask me, why is the sweeper out so much? It just went by here yesterday, that sort of thing.
Correct, through your worship. Yeah, you nailed it. It's just to keep, the more debris we can pick up on our curb lines, and that keeps it out of our catch basins. And the main goal is just that we have sump holes in every catch basin. We don't want them to surcharge as soon as they do it, and it enters into our storm piping. And then it's very expensive equipment required to mainline flush all of our storms. So as much debris as we can pick up on the road surface, and then have a program to keep our catch basin sumps sucked out, that's the cheap end of it, and the preventative side of not having to get into plugging our pipes or anything like that and having to flush them out. So yes, it's just to keep them out of our system.
Thank you.
Our network,
Sorry?
our ground network, yeah.
Thank you for that. Explain that. The downside of it was that I've seen a lot of people sweeping their leaves out to the street. So it's 6 of one, half a dozen the other. But we had a different year this year for leaves. So
Yeah, we sure did.
thank you.
Great, thanks, folks. I think at this point, we'll take a 15-minute break. We've been at this since the lunch break for just over 2 hours. So a lot of numbers and a lot of conversations. So I think it's time for a break. So we'll see you in 15 minutes. Great, thanks. Welcome back, everyone, and we're going to continue on. I think, Jeff, you're up, and you have to remind me what slide we're on. Public Works, Stormwater, is that it? Great, thanks, Jeff. Is there any questions or comments with respect to this slide on page 73? Seeing none, moving on to page 74, Public Works and Grading. Great, thanks, Jeff. Is there any question? I see Councillor Pinnell's got a question.
Thank you, Worship. Through you, Jeff, we've had this conversation, but you're telling me it's approximately $10,000 for granular per kilometer. Is that the 3 inches that you just spoke of? And so if we take, for example, some roads that are in Ward 3 right now and the state that they're in, and with the thaw and freeze that we've been having this year, the road surface has been really slippery, and you and I had this conversation that it's because part of it is thawing and the base is remaining frozen. If we were to spend the money to go out and add 3 inches onto it, how would that affect our roads right now? Would that do any benefit to the slop that we're having coming up, or would that just kind of make during this period?
Sorry about that. It wouldn't be beneficial to do it at this point in time. Right now, our grader is cycling nonstop. It's making it pass through all of our gravel roads and then repassing through. The problem we see in this is every time in a perfect world, we'd have Mother Nature would freeze the roads over and they would remain frozen. Whenever we have our ice blades on right now, and we're having to scat fire into them and loosen it up. If we had a snow event come and we just have that loose granular on top of the roads, there's good chances that granular is going to wind up in the ditches. So we want to touch them as little as possible, but the problem is we have to go over them because, probably 3 to 4 inches underneath that slop, it's frozen, and then that's just all the fine clays and granular dust and stone. So after we do grade them too, the stone right now at this time of year, opposite to summer, compacts in first, and then all of the fines flush up to the top, and then that's what makes it a very slick surface. In summertime, the fines settle out right after when they're dry, they settle out first, and the stone comes to the top. So we do apply some granular this time of year due to those circumstances. Whenever we have a flushing and a very sheen surface on top, we have to put granular on them just to maintain a grip, traction on the surface. Or if there's ice and we'll have to spread some granular on top for icing. Other than that, I don't want to put gravel on the roads at this time of year for the fear that it's going to wind up in the ditches. The springtime prior to we usually hit it hard in the spring prior to the first dust control, and then again in the fall prior to the second application of dust control are usually the best times to apply granular, where we can retain as much of the materials we put on the roads.
Okay, thank you. Just another question, if you don't mind, Mr. Mayor. You have on our surface treated roads, you have a program and you're doing a really good job with keeping what we already maintain. But I feel that in Ward 3, we've kind of lost the dirt roads, and it's, excuse my expression, but the dirt road is, that's what they've become. You're saying to get back on the track, we're currently right now, any road that you want to pick in Ward 3, we wouldn't see gravel between 18, 22 years if we stay on the monetary budget that we're on now.
The new funding of this year, it would reduce that to around, it's good, it's a broad, based on traffic volumes and everything, we may have to visit some roads more than others. So somewhere between 10 to 12 years right now with the funding of this year. Last year's funding had us out around the 22 years. Now we've cut that essentially in half. So around 12 years. A good amount to see in here to address industry standards, but there are some repairs that need to be made to the roads too. There's some substantial road substructure that needs to be addressed as well. So we'll be putting on some B gravel. We'd like to see somewhere in the area of about $225,000, $250,000 annually in that budget cost center would fund the appropriate program and get us to eventually we could get on a program that we wouldn't be having to just run and gun and hit the most priority spots.
Okay, thank you. So just for the people that may be watching at home, it's not as simple as just saying $10,000 per kilometer then, because of the subsurface that we need to work at as well.
Yeah, there's berming on the sides of the roads that need to be removed, some ditching and yeah, build up in areas where there just hasn't been attention put to or the proper attention in the past, maybe with funding constraints and such.
I see that with the projects that are on the books, or what the ask are, there's some surface treatment in our Ward 3, but there's no allotment for any granular put on. Is this something that we'd be looking at for next year now, or do we have, or could we see some granular put on for a maintenance type of?
That is, this cost center here is addressing the path to get there was incrementally increasing this line item and getting us to a spot where we could have a wholesome program. So this $45,000 increase in the materials and supplies of this particular line item will have us address many more roads, and hopefully future years, future budget deliberations, we can keep getting that to the place where it needs to be, the proper amount of funding.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Is there any other questions or comments with respect to the slide that's on page 74? Seeing none, moving on to page 75, dust control.
So the materials and supplies through this cost center there's an increase of 21,640. We have experienced over the past few years a 12% increase in our calcium product. This allows for 2 deployments of calcium chloride to be placed on our granular roads annually. Any reduction within this would drastically decrease the service levels provided.
Thanks, Jeff. Is there any questions or comments with respect? Go ahead, Councilor Purnell.
Thank you, Worship. Through you, Jeff, typically How long does a application last in time wise?
Again, there's no hard and fast answer on that. It depends on if you're getting a right amount of moisture to reactivate the calcium as it's down, or if you're getting too much moisture and you're washing it away, a long extended periods of drought. We will sometimes send a water truck over the roads just to activate it and keep it working. 2 months roughly, we deploy. We try and get to the end of May if possible. That gives us time to get the granular on. We have a dry spring. We usually the phones are ringing off the hook by the time we get on, but usually end of May, and then August is usually when we'd like to probably start doing the next end of August.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions or comments with respect to dust control? Seeing none, moving on to traffic operations, Public Works.
Sorry. Traffic operations, material and supplies here is the purchase of our town-owned signs, the maintenance of those signs. And the contracted services is agreements we are in with CP and CN Railways for our level crossings and any cost sharing agreements we may have and with them.
Great. Is there any questions with respect to traffic operations? Councillor Hicks.
Through you, your worship, I don't know if this probably doesn't fall in under traffic operations, but the on and off ramps, especially the ones on 41. Correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't there a discussion held with MTO about cleaning those up? Like cutting the grass and just making it look a little bit more, I don't know, presentable, nice, inviting, pick your word.
Correct. Through your worship, we did have with our contact with MTO, we had a Zoom meeting with them one day, and we asked, I will have to look if I received a follow-up. They were going to go and explore some more options. They did experience, due to the extra rain this year and everything else and the growth, they were held up and got behind schedule. So we asked them about the more presence, maybe especially in our urban where you're entering into our municipality and such. And also if there's a way that they could possibly hire us to cut some. So I'll have to look back on the response on that. I was given an answer that it was duly noted and they would try and put more effort on, especially in areas where coming into our municipality. But they did apologize for being behind schedule this year, and they would see if there was any kind of being able to hire town forces to maybe offset that when we seen a need in it.
Great. Thanks, Councillor Hicks. Councillor Shank.
So, Jeff, who's in charge of garbage collection on MTO property, especially on the entrances?
Well, through your worship, if it was something noted, like we seen it within our town limits, we would address that and pick it up, work in partnership with them. But it would be a responsibility of the MTO road authority to address any garbage or anything like that.
So this is just a suggestion. This is your area of expertise that you got Quinny detachment, the prison that's in here. You know what I mean? If you have to do they have any work that they have to go ahead and somebody's getting sentenced to it, because the amount of garbage when you come into this town, you know what I mean? It's just, everybody seems to go off the 401 and they get on the 401 and everything gets chucked. It's just that it looks atrocious. So if MTO is responsible, then I would suggest them to do it. And if not, you could talk to the local judges, say when you're sentencing them, you know, community, you know, that they have to do so much community work. Maybe you get them to do it, but it does look terrible. Unless you burn it off.
Thanks, Councillor Shank. Is there anything else? If not, we'll move on to the next slide, page 77, sidewalks.
Sidewalks, the materials here is related to just small purchases of granular in preparation of any sidewalk repairs that may need to be take place, patching and such like that if there's trip hazard or cracks identified. The contracted services is allotment for our contractor to come in and perform sidewalk replacement panels.
Thanks, Jeff. Is there any question or comments with respect to sidewalks? Seeing none, moving down to Public Works streetlights.
Streetlights, this is, again, status quo from last year. There is, 2024 is the last year within, our warranty period for our, that through that Street Smarts program. We conducted the LED changeouts in 2014. So 2025, we will make sure that everything is, replaced by the end of this year and the controllers and lights. And we'll have to have a good grasp on how many we feel may be blowing out in 2025, and we would be on the hook for the purchase and repair of those lights come 2025.
Great, thanks. Is there any questions or comments with respect to streetlights? Seeing none, moving on to winter control.
Okay, winter control, the materials and supplies here. A great portion of this is made up for just the purchase of salt, sand, and brine. And as I say, stone dust and such for winter control. Contracted services, that's just for any additional contracted services we may need to help offset our in-house services in the winter time. I don't know if you guys want to talk about any extra surplus within these winter materials this year would go towards creating a reserve account to help offset future years if they were more calls and winter operations.
Thanks, thanks, Jeff. Is there any questions or comments with respect to the winter control, Public Works? Councillor Pennell.
Thank you, Worship. Jeff, so the salt and the brine is purchased in conjunction with the county to get the best price that we have.
Correct.
Is there a limit on how much that we can purchase through that deal?
I don't have the exact tonnage in my head, but for salt, we do put our projections in, so then we're guaranteed certain quantities. There has been years in the past, Peter may be able to speak on this, that we've gone over those quantities and we've still been served. But usually we maintain our purchases are underneath of that allotment that we request.
Okay, thanks. And during, so as we're winding up the winter here, would we fill the barns again or leave them empty for the summer?
We try to go into the summertime with not like sand and stone dust. We buy all of that we project we're going to need in the fall or late summer and try and get it into the barns and under cover. Try and keep it as dry as possible so we don't have big clumps of frozen stuff for winter operations. Sand or salt, though, we try and run very minimal amounts to carry through the summertime, and we would fill back up prior to next season.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Is there any other questions with respect to the winter control slide? Seeing none, moving on to Fire Department, page 80. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks.
Through your worship, just before Chief Hammond steps up here to speak, I just want to make a note on the revenue side. Much of that is attributed to MTO revenues, and it's really dependent on what comes in year out. Is not something we necessarily make money on. Unfortunately, we may get some funds back, but it's not a true. It's more of a cost recovery in that sense, but not even fully cost recovery. And then just on the wages and benefits side, there is the full year of a full-time firefighter, and also we did increase the paid on call budget as we're seeing call volume increase. Obviously, wages do as well. So,
and we also had 2 retirements that we had payouts for as well. Good afternoon, Council and Mayor. Through your worship, I don't know if you have any questions on anything on this slide other than the last part of it. I am obligated under our ENR bylaw to inform you when we have crisis. I have come to this council for the last 2 years asking for 4 firefighters, and I'm asking you again. I've had to change our response model twice in the last year, and it's been unfavorable.
Before we go any further, Chief,
Sure.
today's meeting, we've been following the slides and then we've been moving forward. And I
Sure.
suspect that the slide that we're looking at here on page 80 is broken down on the following slides. Can we continue to play or continue to go by that process? And if we, because that's the process we've used for every other department and every other section asking for things. And I'd like to continue on with that process if we can. So I'd ask you to stick to page 80 at this point.
I'm on
And
page
then-
80.
And then we
Mayor.
will continue on down through the slides, and if we get any further, then we'll address that, so.
Are there any questions on slide 80?
Is there any questions, Councillor Nori?
Thank you. I'm just, oops, sorry. I'm just curious, I don't disagree with 4 full-timers. I agree with public safety. In this price that you've come up with, or that comes out, have you factored in that we have 24/7, 365 coverage with two full-timers at all times? That's my first question.
So right now, through your worship, we have 8 full-time firefighters. 6 of them are dedicated to suppression. I have a training officer and an FPO. If I split them up into 4 platoons of 2 on 12-hour shifts, they could provide 24-hour response. However, the legislated requirements for a fire prevention officer and a training officer, primarily their jobs are Monday to Friday for inspections. We follow the 3 lines of defense, right? Public education, inspection upon complaint or request, and then response as the third one. My present model right now, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention on this slide, we are missing the 65 paid on call staff that are also represented in all of my figures on this slide. I have 45 of those positions filled. I'm down 20, and we're running a recruit program right now with 8 staff. Did I answer your question through your worship?
Maybe I didn't ask it right.
Oh,
You're suggesting 4 more full-time firefighters.
I am.
Would that give us 24/7, 365, 2 firefighter coverage all the time is what I'm asking.
It would also allow a truck to be out of the station in 90 seconds every call.
Excellent, but have you factored in backfill for annual leave, paternity leave, parental leave, all the leaves that are out there now? We hire
Again,
younger officers.
we've had discussions with that, and I don't want to table something that's in negotiations. We also have a CRA, and we also have a fire master plan that are defining documents, as we've said throughout the last several weeks. Yep, absolutely. Appreciate the question.
Thank you, Councillor Nori. Is there any other questions before I ask some questions? Councillor Pennell.
It's more of a speech, Your Worship.
You may make a statement if you want, if it's related to page 80 or any of this presentation that we've heard so far. Go ahead, Councillor Pennell.
Thank you. So there's been some talk about holding off on hiring new staff for fire in the wait for a fire master plan and your risk assessment. The issue that I have with waiting that long is that I have been waiting that long for a fire plan. We hired a company to do it. We stopped them. We put it on the shelf. I think that in a report that I could probably find as we've went back to them, I'm not quite sure of the whole thing on that. But if we wait longer, we're just procrastinating on what I feel is going to be evident in the long run. My concerns is if we take into consideration when it was done a year ago, if we wait to the end of this year, and by the time we hire, it's going to be another year gone. I'm not too sure that we could do 4 but we should be able to do something for you. We have over 1,600 homes draft approved. We have a new lawn care facility being built at the hospital with 128 beds. We have a new lawn care facility being built at Village Green with 128 beds on Drive-In Road. Now, mind you, 48 beds is what they have in Selby already, so we can do some math deduction on that. Goodyear's adding a $600 million expansion and over 200 jobs. Council's approved 4 energy projects, and one of them being a 450 megawatt gas turbine. Maybe it's not time right now to hire 4, but we should be able to do something. Is my, maybe half or. And my question to you, Chief, in a second is going to be, how would that look with your platoons if we couldn't give you 4? Also, I just want to speak a little bit about the tiered response. Is my understandings that emergency services can provide CPR. And if I'm on the floor and somebody's pushing on my chest, I would not care what color their uniform is. And if we go to reduction in the amount of time between when an ambulance is available and when the fire trucks roll, that might come back and haunt us. As they say, every second counts. So I'd like to hear what other members of council is thinking. And my question to you, Chief, is if we can't give you 4, what can we do?
I think that's the question out of that statement. So we'll let you answer that question.
Through your worship, I have 6 suppression staff right now. I'll take a page out of your book and your book. I'll take 2. I'm not going to stop asking for more staff. 2 would help me get 4 platoons of 2 to start, to provide a service to this community 24 hours a day. We're always going to be a composite fire department, and I want to make sure that my paid on call are not feeling displaced by this or by any statement that I'm making today. I'm trying to move the department forward for a safer community and a better response model. Our community deserves it.
Go ahead, Councilor Pennell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for just as a follow-up. Thank you, Chief, for that. I just want to address council here for a second. We've talked earlier today about purchasing 2 tandem snowplows to look at the possibility of saving monies. And I'm just concerned that we're looking after the residents in one way to keep the roads clean, but we also have to look after their health and their well-being as well. And if for some reason that we cannot continue forward with providing emergency services with staff as we grow, we at least we owe it to everybody, every resident of this community, to at least put a placeholder in place, because if by the time that we get around to actually hiring somebody, it's not going to be until Q3, Q4 anyway. So if we're not going to act on this, we should at least put a placeholder in there so that when it does happen, I know that we're looking for some documents, if that comes this year, that we should be ready to go on this and not have to procrastinate till next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Pennell. Is there anybody? Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, through you. I don't want to repeat everything Councilor Pennell has said, but I agree with Councilor Pennell, and as much as I hate to say it, that $75,000 request you made for the pool committee would pay for one firefighter right there alone. So you're right. We look at other things, and I rely on the chief. I have confidence in the chief. He's given me information in the past when I've had questions on things that pertain to the safety of the community. And when he comes to us and asks us for 4 more firefighters, I take notice of that, and I think we need to have an expanded conversation about that. But like I say, I won't repeat everything Councillor Pennell said. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Is there any other comments before I weigh in? Councillor Shank.
So, we have a composite department. So the point is we have the paid on call firefighters. If you accumulate what their experience is and what the experience of your professional full-time firefighters are, but what we have to do is know the facts of what our master fire plan. Now, we had one, not in our term, not in this term, but just in the last term, there was one. I don't know if it was ever presented to council. Every time I've asked somebody, it wasn't presented, it was thrown out. All right. So that was, why was it thrown out? I don't know, because I can't bring up the past. But without having a fact-based and looking at the old plan or what it had and what it asked for is in full-time is contradictory of what they're asking for. And I shouldn't say they, that our fire department is asking for. Until we know the facts, you cannot base it on, because I have just many arguments that are this way. I have just many arguments that way. We have a tiered response that the county is going to be looking at. It's not going to be a long drawn out thing from what I've been assured of. All right. And until we find out, because based on the chief's numbers, all right, of 766 calls, I think 291 of those were medicals. Now, quote me if I'm wrong, we don't administer O2 sats until it's below 92. Is that correct?
No,
No. When do we administer oxygen then?
I'm not the expert in the medical field. I've been out of that for a while. So I'd rather not start quoting stats.
So what I would suggest is since the chief cannot answer that and I can't, I'm only going from what previously was done and what I can research, till we have all those facts are and how many, what we're doing is efficient way or what we're not doing or what we're responding to and what we're not responding to, that I would suggest that we have all the facts in front of us first. Then we can go ahead and decide, yes, this is the model that we need. This is the model we don't need, because when they're saying you need after hours, after the full-timers are there, at nighttime, well, you've got paid on call with some extremely experienced firefighters. Why not have some of those guys do that night? Some of the paid on call do the night shift of 2. You know what I mean? All I'm saying is there's a lot of questions out there that maybe I'm not privy to, but all I'm saying is there's a lot of facts out there that I don't know yet. And until we have all those facts, it would be improper or unethical as far as I'm concerned to say yes, no, or maybe, or what we can do, what we can't do.
Thank you,
Through
Councillor.
your worship, may I just
Thank you.
respond to?
Yeah, yep. I don't know if there's a question there, but you can respond. So
But there was
go
a
ahead.
couple of statements that I'd just like to clarify. So your suggestion of having paid on call staff our stations after hours would be contracting out. Unfortunately, I'm obligated to follow the collective agreement. Secondly, if I could get them out at night consistently, that's the problem right now. Our paid on call, this is not a homegrown problem. It's a national crisis. People are busy. If we look at the arena fire, I had 13 of my own staff there. For a building that size, I required 24. I had 13 of my own. I had 6 full-time staff there. They came back after their shift to assist. That left me with 8 paid on call for a decade, a career fire, we call it. We wouldn't have been as successful if I didn't have or didn't utilize mutual aid right away. And I've talked to our mutual aid partners. Some of them are in the same situation. And others are saying, because we're going through in the mayor, through your worship, you know that all of our agreements are out there on the tables. And if I start calling them in when I haven't used all my resources, the mutual aid plan of Ontario will then start looking at Napanee and going, you're using this to augment staffing issues. And that's another fear I have. Through your worship.
Thank you, Chief. Is there any other comments before I weigh in? Go ahead, Councillor Shank.
So as like you said, so there's a lot of facts that we have to look into as a municipality, as a council, because it's not like I fell off the cabbage truck yesterday when it came to the fire department. So what we have to do is look at why aren't they responding? Is there a problem there? Is there not a problem there? And if there is a problem, we're going to have to fix that problem. So the point is that let's fix the problems we currently have. Let's go with the facts that we have, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you, Councillor Shank. Deputy Mayor Calver.
Yeah, there's not a one of us that's here that doesn't want to look after our community, but we have to look after our community in a whole manner. We need to look at facts and figures. We've got requests out there. Also with the county, I know there's things in works on the county side of things. We've got our budget meeting tomorrow as well coming up. We need to see all the facts and figures before we start doing more hire.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Calver. Is there any other comments, questions, or concerns? Councillor Pennell.
Thank you, Worship. I'm not getting a warm fuzzy feeling from council right now. So what I suggested earlier was that as we're going through our budget and after we're done, we're going to go through the sheets and vote on what we're going to have, what we're going to add, what we're going to take away. This particular one, I think that I'd like to call for a recorded vote on it. But everyone is in agreement that we're waiting for paperwork. And if we're voting today, I think that it's very important for us to at least put a placeholder in the budget for us for at least 2 firefighters. So that would be my recommendation. If we're not gonna vote positively on it, but I mean positively to actually allow for it to go through, then we need to at least put a placeholder. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pennell. Is there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I'm going to weigh in on this. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Bill.
Sorry, Mayor. I just wanted to make one other. When do we expect to have the community risk assessment and the fire master plan completed? Will it be before our drop dead decision on the budget?
I don't believe so. I've been instructed by the chief that our fire master plan may be available after or by the end of Q1. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, Chief.
Through your worship, the CRA, the Community Risk Assessment, is the legislated piece of document that has to be done by July 20-something of this year. We've committed to have that done at the end of Q1, beginning of Q2. Again, we did have a company we were working with. Unfortunately, deadlines had passed, and we're working on the 23 stats. Unfortunately, with the communication issues we've had over the last month and a bit, that's slowed us down a bit. But we are committed to have that document in front of you, which fire administration is going to create. So you will have that.
Does that answer your question? Councilor
Thank you.
Martin?
That does answer me. Yeah.
Deputy Mayor Calver.
Through you, your worship. So our fire department's going to create their own master plan, or are we hiring that out to another company?
Through your worship, I've been asked to finalize the CRA to get it done before July, so it will be done internally. The master fire plan or fire master plan, depending on how you look at it, is not legislated to be done, but it is a good companion document for council, because in it, we will set out after our risk assessments are done, which we have in front of us already. We know our risks. We then identify those risks and we put mitigating factors in place if we can, or administrative or other items to assist the fire department, whether that's calling in neighbors. Anyway, it's a 5 to 10 year plan. And the mayor and I have agreed that that's a companion document to the CRA, but the CRA has to be done first. You have to know the risks that we're facing, and one of them is staffing. I can tell you that without having that document in front of me, but through your worship.
Thank you, Chief.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Deputy.
No, I just thought that doing your own plan would be kind of a bit of a conflict of interest. I think the plan that they had worked on before was through Lorex, I believe. that we wanted to put it on the shelf. So that was back 2022.
Through your worship, it was Lumex Group.
Okay, so we're not using that at all then.
Through your worship, that project was halted.
All right, thank you.
I don't know if we'd say the project was halted. However, the fire master plan was not presented to council. Am I correct with that?
My understanding of the fire master plan, again, that I was not privy to all of the workings of what was going on with it. It was, a draft copy was sent to the fire department. It was looked at by our staff. It went to the present senior management team at the day with the fire chief of the day. And for whatever reason, it was shelved.
Right. And correct me if I'm wrong, that the community risk assessment, was it also done by the same company, Lumex?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else before I comment? Seeing none, I'm gonna be very blunt here. Is that there is a reason why we do fire master plans. There's a reason why we do community risk assessments. Council is tasked with making informed and defendable decisions. The documents that we have asked for, and for reasons, there could be a plethora of reasons why those documents haven't been presented to us. However, those documents provide us with an insight as to what this community needs, not only with staffing, but the level of service in which our community expects. I quite personally believe it is completely premature to suggest that we hire 4 firefighters or even put a placeholder in place for 4 firefighters until such time as those documents have been completed. We've also got a medical tiered response agreement that we know is not effective. We know, and I think if I'm not mistaken, Chief, the information may have come from you, that we are responding to calls. Our fire department is responding to calls that we shouldn't be responding to. And it's because of the tiered response agreement. We have a commitment from our upper tier government that they are going to look at this and they're going to be able to provide some information to us in the very near future. I'm going to suggest that it is an integral part of the service levels that we provide, because if our firefighters are doing things that they shouldn't be doing or doing things because of the agreement, it affects how our firefighters work, and it affects the job that they're doing, and it ultimately affects the level of service that's being provided. So I really do believe this is premature. Taxpayers put their faith in us to make informed, defendable decisions. And I quite honestly cannot make those decisions in my heart until such time as those documents have been completed. I'm just one vote. I'm simply just a person that's been elected to look after the well-being of the community. However, we've been here for a better part of 8 or 9 hours, and we've heard of requests, everything from our roads to our equipment. And I'm not afraid to say that we are making a very aggressive move with respect to medical care in this community for the budget year 2024. We are going to suggest that we put a substantial amount of money into our reserves in order to make sure that people in this community have doctors. Are there some pressures here within this community that we are going to have to make some tough decisions on? Absolutely. But we need to make informed, defendable decisions with respect to what we're going to do with the taxpayers' money. And I'll be quite honest with you, at this point, at least in my heart, I don't have that ability to do that right now. So until I see some documents, until I see some processes, until I see some policies that will guide us, which is what a fire master plan does, I don't think we're in a position to be able to make those decisions. And I apologize, Councillor Pennell, but I don't think we are in that position to make that. At least I'm not. So that's my opinion on it. That's my thoughts on it. And you're more than welcome to respond, Chief.
You selected me as your chief fire official. I am the fire professional in the room, certified, qualified. I'm telling you, we have a staffing issue. If I don't have vulnerable positions filled on a fire ground and somebody dies, Mayor, and I am sounding the alarm at this point. And I get it. It's dramatic. I'm losing sleep over this for 2 years.
Would this be the opportunity that we involve the fire marshal's office? As a fire professional, would this be the opportunity that we contact the fire marshal's office to deal with an emergency?
No, because I can make don't shake your head like that, Mayor. That's rude. You want to bring the fire marshal's office in to do what? An audit of the fire department?
This is my meeting. This is my meeting and I control this meeting. I will control this meeting the way I want to control this meeting. And what appears as though you've come here looking for a fight because you've not followed the process. You've not followed the agenda the way it is. You come in here barking orders that you need 4 firefighters. This is my meeting. I will control this meeting the way I will control this meeting. And you will be a presenting member of the organization of the Corporation of the Town of Greater Napanee. Just so we get this and established
Your
this
worship.
straight.
Wow.
You're more than willing to comment.
I have no comment.
Thank you. If there's nothing else with respect to the slide on page 80, we'll move to page 81. Fire Department, Napanee Hall.
Are there any questions on this slide that I can answer for council?
Seeing none. Moving on to page 82, Roblin Hall Fire Department.
Through your worship, are there any questions I can answer on this slide for Roblin?
Seeing none. Page 83, Fire Department, Dorland Hall.
Through your worship, are there any questions on this slide that I can answer for council?
Page 84, Government, General Government. And I'm not sure who's going to,
It won't be me, Mayor.
I'm not sure who's going to lead that one.
Thank you,
but it'll
Council.
be somebody else. Thank you, Chief.
Do you want me to take these? Through your worship, the general government slide is a combination of a number of corporate-wide expenditures. Main portion of it in terms of revenue, our penalty and interest, supplementals, PILs, our OMPF funding, and then some bank interest and some other one-off revenues there. I don't think there's anything outside of the realm of what council's seen in the past. And then the materials and supplies, for the most part, is just some corporate-wide expenses. So literally postage and courier fees and office supplies. And then our contracted services is a combination of insurance as well as some leases that we have for our copiers and such, and legal fees contingency. Is there any questions on this slide as a whole?
Is there any questions with respect to general government on page 84? Councillor Pennell.
Thank you, Worship. Nathan, the tax written off, can you just give us an idea of an example of such?
Through your worship to Councillor Pennell. The tax write-off line item that you see there is for in-year adjustments. So if there was a change in classification, for example, if someone was granted a farm tax classification, a TIA, or if they had a reduction in assessment due to an appeal, that's the line item that would cover that expense.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Pennell. Is there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, moving on to general government, and I think this was probably related to the last slide. Is there anything on there that anybody wants to discuss? Seeing none. Physician recruitment. Who's going to address that?
Through your worship, I can speak to that briefly. This is what you just mentioned previously. So a rather large investment into reserves for physician recruitment into the future. Not much to add at this point.
Great, thank you. Is there any questions or comments with respect to this slide on page 86? Councillor Pennell.
Thank you, through your worship. The discussion that just happened and the comment of the $290,000 to reserves, do we have an idea of when the program would be presented to council so we can have a fulsome look at what the $290 in reserve, $290,000 in reserves is going to help us do?
I will direct that question to Mr. Zatterberg.
Through your worship, for the program to start in March, I've given the parties dates for when they have to meet the council meetings in February. So if the intent is still to move forward, if they don't meet the February dates, for council to be able to make a decision and maybe defer to a subsequent meeting, then any payments that would have been made in March aren't going to happen. And at some point in time, council will then have an opportunity to make a decision whether or not they proceed with that. However, the money in reserve for physician recruitment will need to be there in any case, because it'll be back to the former model of bringing doctors in and helping them with set up their offices as we've been doing over a 4 or 5 year period.
Thank you. However, that model of what we had before is half of what we'd be putting in the reserves now. So if we resort back to that, we would still leave the full amount into that reserve?
Through your worship, I think as we've touched on a number of different times, even if it isn't towards this specific reserve, it could be repurposed. But at the same time, say this method does come forward in future years, it could be sitting in reserve to smooth the cost in future years and reduce that liability or that expense moving forward. So there's that ability as well. I know it's a large sum of money for a single year, but if it is reduced this year, we could just see it back next year to the same magnitude, but it may actually, if it doesn't come into the fold for all of 2024, we may actually be able to reduce it and smooth that cost in future years as well. If we're looking at it long term. I am aware that this year is obviously a tight year, but that seems to be the case every year as municipal budgeting goes.
Yep, go ahead, Councillor Pennell.
Thank you, Worship. As a follow-up with that, it just concerns me that that we're going to make a decision on a large amount of monies, that even if it was half of that is a 1% on our taxes. So my concern is that we're already running a tight budget. We've got some things that we can and can't do in this budget, and we're putting this money in, and we're really not quite sure. I hope that the program goes through, but we're not sure if it's going to or not. So that's the concern that I have, is that we're tying up monies and putting that onto our tax bill. And if it's not used, it's just going to be put into some other, as stated, put into some other reserve fund. So
I think Councillor Shank wants to comment.
My question is for Brent. Are you still optimistic, or are you like, are you optimistic that this program that we might be having, will that go forth, or do you think that it's a 50-50?
Through your worship, I am confident that it's going to continue, and the discussions are going to continue. There has been agreements made between other parties on some legal issues. There has been advancements there, but also I mean, I know I'm speaking in code because we're by this, but there's been a change in personnel with one of the players, and that could or could not affect it. The February date still stands. I gave them a date, or I gave them 2 dates. The first one was in January. That came and went. So the February date for council to make a decision on whether or not this is proceeding as of March. And at that point in time, we'll be making you a presentation on whether or not you'll be able to tell whether or not this is sustainable. And you can make the final decision on whether or not it's going ahead.
Thank you, Councillor Hicks.
Through you, your worship. Brant, how do I ask this question? The date in January came and went. Was there any communication from the other party that we've been dealing with? Or was it just a black hole of silence and you reached out again and said, okay, there's 2 dates in February and you haven't heard anything back yet? Is a phone call warranted from somebody else? Not me, but yeah, that could maybe prompt a response.
Through your worship, no, it was, there's 2 other parties involved in this, and they had to settle some agreements between the 2 parties first. I was aware of that. I was made aware of that. I understand everybody's frustration as I'm frustrated, but I'm confident they are closer to their decisions, if not have settled that.
I don't think we can lose sight of the fact that at one point, we had a very generous donation of $200,000 for this physician recruitment fund. There was an intention to continue to put money into this reserve fund in order to be prepared for any possibility of attracting physicians here. Unfortunately, there was no money put into these reserves for a number of years, and that $200,000 in a very short order got down to zero. So regardless of how this plays out, I do believe that we need to put money into a reserve for physician recruitments. And we all know that there's many, many people in this community that don't have physicians, and it's not like we've got a bunch of them sitting on the shelves that we can just take one off the shelf whenever we need one. So it seems like an awful lot of money at this point, but it really isn't. And because we've stolen from Peter to pay Paul, the reserve fund that we had there, which was a $200,000 donation, was gone. And basically, if we don't rebuild it, then if we do have an opportunity to attract a new physician here, we've got no reserve to acquire them or to retain them. So is there anything further anybody would like to go ahead, Councillor Shank?
So the crux of the matter is if this works and what we're trying to do, and if it works with all the parties confirmed, I think there's 5,000 to 6,000 people without a doctor in our municipality. Is that correct? That was the last figure I had. So, we are working at something. It's just, we're going to try to see if we can have a different business model or a different model to see to get it work. So I know it's frustrating level at any business to try to get it up and running, but we have to take baby steps until all parties say, yes, we'll all play nice in the sandbox. So there we go.
Thanks, Councillor Shank. Is there anything further? Seeing none, moving on to finance, page 87.
Through your worship, not much to add here. There's not a whole lot within the finance department outside of staff wages. Small amounts of revenue come from tax certificates and tax bill statements reprints. And then materials and supplies are basically associated costs for mailing or printing, I guess I should say, of tax bills and staff. And then contracted services is primarily made up of audit services. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Nathan. Is there any questions or comments with respect to the finance slide on page 87? Seeing none. Human resources, page 88. I think that's Holly.
Hello, Council. Through you, Your Worship, I'm here to answer any questions about the human resources slide that you see in front of you today.
Thanks, Holly. Is there any questions with respect to human resources on page 88? Deputy Mayor Calver.
I just see transfer of reserves, $5,000. What does that entail?
Through your worship, that is a transfer to our accessibility reserve, which we are legislatively required to have.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Shank, Councillor Shank. Yes. Thank you very much. Is there anything further with respect to human resources on page 88? Seeing none. Information technology. I think, Nathan, you're going to speak to this.
So through your worship, the significant change, well, it's two significant changes, I would say. We've added a reserve contribution to this portion, and a portion of the revenue that comes in from that is off those towers. So we're trying to allocate something to IT services to have a reserve for the future as that had become depleted. And then service contracts. In the next slide, there is a breakdown. Some of the IT contracted services are covered off by the departments themselves. For instance, CIS and City View booking, as was mentioned earlier. So this is kind of the different layers that we have of them. So the total cost here will not mirror the total cost you see on the previous slide, but it gives a sense of what kind of stuff is within that line item and some of the layers to it. But happy to take any questions. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not great on the technical background of IT, but we're somewhat depleted in that area right now, unfortunately.
We've been keeping them fairly busy lately, so you're absolutely right. Is there any questions with respect to information technology on page 89 or page 90? Councillor Hicks.
Just a really quick one. Thank you, Your Worship. Nathan, so on previous slides, we were talking about insurance and the recent hacking. Do our insurance, are the insurance premiums likely to go up because of that? And are we reviewing policies? Just, I guess, just more of an I'm just looking for some information there as a follow-up.
I'll speak to that briefly. So at this time, we are not aware how that is going to impact our insurance premiums. That hopefully can come in a future date, but we don't have that information today.
Is there any further conversations with respect to these two slides? Seeing none. Executive Office, page 91.
Through your worship, this department essentially just houses the CAO and the executive assistant to the CAO. As mentioned previously, CAO position is vacant. I know we're in the process of that hiring. There was an adjustment to the wages as it was going to be a prorated portion. Based on timelines now, it actually might not hit that $250,000, just depending on when they're hired. But everything else that's in there is basically some one-off memberships and cell phone costs. There's really not much to this at this point in time.
Great, thanks, Nathan. Is there any conversation with respect to the Executive Office slide on page 91? Seeing none. And I think we're at the bottom of our presentations. Am I correct, Ellen?
That's correct.
Now, as promised, we do have some unfinished business going back through the presentation. And I think staff is looking for some direction with respect to a number of those discussions that we had earlier.
Through your worship, yeah, ideally we would like some decisions today. I know we do have another meeting scheduled for the 20th, I believe. So 2 weeks time, but as much as we could have wrapped up today would be fantastic. And we can kind of fine tune things before that final meeting, even if there's an agreed upon budget, I guess at this point, contingent. I don't know if Jessica has a better term to state here, but essentially you could have sober second thought, I think is what it's described as, to look back at it on the 20th rather than rehashing some things over again.
Yes, through your worship, any direction given tonight would all be provisional as it has been until this date. Staff's intention on February 20th would be to present you the overall impact of every piece of direction that's been given so far, make sure there's no additional fine tuning that needs to be done, issue our public notice, and then have the budget be adopted at one of the council meetings in March.
Great. As I told you earlier, I made a bit of a list here as we were going along. So I will start to go down the list, and maybe Ellen, you can help me out with that and if you have the ability, give me the page and the slides where those requests were. It would be a great help to me. So the first one I have on the list, and they're together, we have a request for a boom lift as well as some work to be done to our soccer pitches.
14.
And I've been told that it's slide 14.
That's correct. And just to provide some context on those, as I provided earlier, so the boom lift is a $65,000 ask, and the impact on the average residential tax rate is 0.48%.
Thank you. We'll be looking for some form of direction, be it a resolution, I believe, Madam Clerk. We would do on a resolution with respect to both of these matters.
Through your worship, yes, I believe at this point we would appreciate a resolution. Again, for the minutes here, I will be noting that these are provisionally included, subject to final budget approval. You don't need to restate that every time. That will just be the assumption.
Yes, great. It's not over till it's over, right? So let's start with the articulating boom lift, $65,000 overall cost, which is going to be funded by the 100% the tax base. We'll entertain a motion or a suggestion here. Councillor Shank.
I just wanted a little clarification here. So guys, right now it's 6.23% residential tax increase for what it is right now. Now, anything that we add on top of that is an increase on top of the 6.23, not including bag tax too, right?
Through your worship to Councillor Shank, that's correct.
So with all the information throughout today, was there any savings that we could reduce this and start this at a lower rate? Because I know I have my ceilings of what is palatable, and we're peaking at the palatable right now. So I hate to agree to something that I know that's going to be, to the point now that's, is just not attainable for what the average taxpayer can afford.
Yeah, so through your worship, based on the conversations that transpired today, there wasn't anything that was presented by council as it related to a change in service or a reduction in a particular line item. So as of right now, the 4 or 5 items that we are discussing, none of them are a reduction to that rate.
The first two things we're going to speak about aren't in one of the recommend 1 or 2, right? So that would be an addition unless there's other efficiencies. And I know staff's going to come back. We're going to boil this down really quickly and easy is that, do we believe we need an articulating boom lift over the next 12 months, I guess is the best way of looking at it. Is it something that we really need? Is it something that we can do without for a little while? Obviously, the lift that we have is screaming at us to tell us that it doesn't want to lift anymore, but that's just my opinion on it. So I'll entertain thoughts or emotion we put on the floor, whether we want this or not. Councillor Martin.
I've seen that lift crawling along and it's pathetic, to be honest with you. I'll make the motion that we go ahead and purchase the boom lift.
We have a motion on the floor directing staff with respect to the articulating boom lift. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Deputy Mayor Calver. Is there any further comments, questions, or concerns with respect to the articulating boom lift? Seeing none, we'll call the vote. All in favor of the motion that's on the floor. Opposed? Motion's carried. Next up is the SPC soccer field overall cost, $168,000. The funding mechanism is 100% tax base. Who wants to start this discussion? Again, it's not in one of the recommendations. However, as we heard today, that field does need some tender loving care. Where do we want to go with this, council? We need to provide at least some direction to staff so we can get this budget kind of finished up, or at least get it closer to the finish line. So is there any thoughts or discussions with respect to the ask for the SPC soccer field? Councillor Pennell.
Thank you, Your Worship. We're all kind of quiet on this one. I'm going to make a motion that we do not proceed with this project.
We have a motion on the floor that we do not proceed with the SPC soccer field overall cost $168,000, moved by Councillor Pennell. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Norrie. Is there any further comments, questions, or concerns with respect to the motion that's on the floor? Seeing none, we'll call the vote. All in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. The next one I have on my list is light fleet, and it looks like 2 3/4 ton trucks and a 1 ton truck. Am I correct with that?
Yes, they are currently in the draft budget right now. So depending if there's a change in council's wishes, I think it would be prudent to have a resolution or a motion that spoke if they did not want to proceed with staff recommendation. If they're fine with what's in there, I think we could leave as is. Perhaps Jessica has any other comments on that procedurally.
Yes, through your worship, if council's comfortable with the inclusion of the 3 light fleet vehicles and 1 heavy fleet tandem included, then we would look for direction to either proceed with scenario 1 or 2 as presented. The only distinction between those two is whether or not the sidewalk plow would be included and to be funded out of development charges, no impact to tax base.
Can you repeat that, Madam Clerk?
Sorry, through your worship, as presented, scenario 1 or 2 would have 3 light fleet and 1 heavy fleet included, and the only distinction between scenario 1 and 2 is whether you fund that sidewalk plow out of your development charges, which does not have a tax rate increase implication.
So, and I think we're going to talk about the trackless snowblower next. But just so I'm clear, we did take out one of the half tons, did we not? So we've only got the 3 vehicles, and they're included in one of the recommendations.
Through your worship, yes, staff in the draft presentation have already removed one of those vehicles.
Okay.
3 remaining that hit the tax base. Oh, well.
Yes,
Yeah.
three through the
Yeah,
tax
2
base, plus
3/4
the
tons and a 1 ton.
four light fleet vehicles, but 1 is 3 utilities, through your worship.
So just to back up, Madam Clerk, it's already in the recommendation. I don't think we will need a motion unless we're going to take them all out, or one of them or 2 of them. Am I correct there?
Through your worship, that's correct. If there's no further changes to the scenario 1 or 2, council can just direct support that would one of those scenarios be included in the draft capital budget.
Yep. Councillor Shank.
I'm winging this here. So Jeff, the F-550, you said that it's in real bad shape. It's shot, right?
That is a Park and Rec's truck, so Chris would be the best to answer it. I could comment on what our
Through your worship to Councilor Shank, yes, it is in rough shape. It's cost a lot of money each and every year just to make sure it's safety for the road.
Now, here I'm going with this. Now, you guys don't, everybody holler at me in one shot, but the 2 F-250s, could they make do for another year without any major expenditures into them?
I could comment on that one. Right now, the 2 trucks that they're to replace 2 trucks for our lead hands are driving, our crew leads, which are on site we split in the summertime. We have 1 crew as capital and 1 crew as operations, run and gun the needs of the municipality. Those 2 trucks now are expired trucks that we're utilizing from the fire department when they retired them. And I believe one's over 300,000 and one's close to 300,000 kilometers. They're half tons. They're barely on the road. I don't even know if I have to see if one of them has pulled off the road right now. Yeah, they're used up.
Well, the only reason why I was saying this, Jeff, is because I was thinking, well, if you could salvage for another year the $275,000 trucks, that's 150. Chris needs 160 for his soccer field. So I was thinking do a swap, do the other next year. He gets his what he wants and you get what you want next year. But if you're at that point, then sorry, number one is to keep you guys working and to have the proper equipment. So there goes that idea.
Through your worship, yeah, like they're not in the weight class that we need them to be, to haul the materials to the site, and they are used up. We would love to make accommodations like that, though.
Counselor Hicks.
Through you, your worship. So if I understand correctly, if we went with scenario one, that would be 2 half tons, a 3/4 ton, and a trackless snowplow, which comes out of development charges. Is that correct? So all we really need to decide on right now is if we want to go with the trackless snowplow, and that determines which scenario we go with.
That, in a nutshell, is pretty much it. That's why we'll deal with the trackless snowplow next.
Okay, because I was going to move that we go with scenario one, but I'll wait.
So we've already got the trucks in both the scenarios. So I think we're good that way unless somebody feels really bad and wants to take them out. But let's, maybe a more important thing, let's talk about the trackless snowblower. Where do we want to go with that? And with respect to that, just to say it's a $300,000 investment with all coming out of development charges. Councillor Hicks.
I'm going to throw in there that it's a year-round vehicle, if I understood correctly. It comes with all the bells and whistles. It's going to be your workhorse year-round. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Norrie.
And just to add, something I didn't realize till today, it's legislated we do the sidewalks. So one doesn't cut it with 55 kilometers of sidewalks. We need to.
Is there somebody willing to make a motion? Deputy Mayor Cower.
I'll make a motion. We run with scenario one and keep the trackless in there.
We have a motion to go with scenario one, keep the trackless in there, in the budget. Is there a seconder? Councillor Norrie. Is there any further comments, questions, or concerns? Councillor Hicks.
I don't know, can I, through your worship, Jessica, can I make a friendly amendment and ask that staff at the time they go out for bid on the tandem also get the pricing on the triaxle at the same time with an estimate on what it would cost us if we deferred that purchase for one additional year. So basically do a placeholder pre-approval for 2025.
Through your worship, a friendly amendment's not required. I believe staff were intending to do that anyway,
Okay,
based
very
on the
good.
earlier conversation.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor. All in favor of the motion if there's no further discussion. Opposed? Motion's carried. Next I have up $75,000 for the Aquatics Committee. And can you help me out with a slide on that one?
26.
Through
Okay.
you, Mayor, I'd just like to add some context to that. So we have same comparators again. That ask is a $75,000 annual contribution for a 0.55% increase to the average residential tax rate.
Thanks, Alan. And is this ask in scenario one?
This ask is not currently included in any of the draft budget.
So it'd be an addition to.
Correct.
Okay. Do we have any direction, Councillor Norrie?
Did I not hear it could come out of, what that fund? I've had a brain. Yes, development fund. Didn't I hear it could come out of that if we change the bylaw, or was I wrong?
Through your worship, we technically could fund this through development charges, but as I mentioned earlier, we would have to amend our development charges bylaw and in the interim borrow from one to fund another in the future, essentially. I don't think that staff believe that that's a path we want to lead down, unfortunately. It's not what we would recommend at this point in time. It's possible, but I wouldn't say it's advisable.
Thanks. Counselor Shank, I think you had your hand up first.
All right, this is my own opinion. Out of respect for Councillor Pennell and the crew that they've been working at for 12 years, you have to answer yourself the question, the way the current state of affairs are in this municipality and financial pressures that we have, can we afford a pool, maintenance, or anything? Because he's asked, we spun our wheels for the last 12 years and we haven't gone ahead. It's unfair to not have the guts to go ahead and say to the guys that have been working on this, say, hey, I'm sorry, we just fiscally, there's no way that we can do it right now. And my personal opinion, looking through the finances right now, there's no way I could spend $75,000, all right, on a pool because of the budget constraints that we're at. All right. That's my own opinion. Maybe I'm only one person.
Thank you, Counselor Shank. Is there anything else, or does someone want to make a motion? Go ahead, Counselor Pennell.
Thank you, Worship. As I said before, we've been at this for such a long time, and we're worried about funding a pool where we don't have a concept drawing of it. So therefore, without concept drawings, it's very hard for us, actually it's impossible for us to go and look for grants. Therefore, we don't even know if we're going to be funding this through taxation. Even if we were allowed monies to put towards drawings, would be better than what we have now. We can maybe have something that we can go to public and ask for donations from them. But right now, as it stands, we have a piece of paper, and I can draw you a drawing of a pool very quick on the back of this piece of paper. But we don't have anything that we can go out and ask for grants or fundraising or anything. So to say that the town is in the situation where they couldn't possibly fund a pool, we're not even there yet. We're not even there to ask for the town for any more monies than what we are right now. And I gotta say, I gotta talk to the pool committee about this, but I think that if we're denied now, I'm gonna ask for a change of mandate for our committee and stop looking at a facility and start looking at transportation. Again, we're just so far away from even asking the town for more monies of this, and you're not even going to give us an opportunity after 12 years to be able to apply to federal and provincial grants. And yet we're worried about where we're going to get money from, and you're not even going to allow this to get off. We had there's a resolution from the last council, and I know it's hard times, but give me something, give us some hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Pennell. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Zatterberg. Did we not make an application for a fairly substantial grant with respect to our aquatics facility, which was a 50% federal grant, 25% provincial grant, maybe 2 years ago or 3 years ago?
It was a three-way split, and we did apply for that. We were not successful in that application, and that was for financing a build that would be substantially more in today's dollars. That much time has passed, and construction costs have gone up.
Okay, thanks. Councilor Pennell.
Through your worship, thank you. Just to respond to that or add to that, we feel that we would have been better off applying for that grant if we were shovel ready, and we're so far from shovel ready. I mean, this is what I'm asking for, is a concept so that we can go forward. It'd be so nice to have storyboards where we can go out and invite the public in and say, hey, this is what we're looking at. This is what our projected costs are. How can we go out for fundraising and keep it away from the pockets of the taxpayers at this time? And again, I plead to you guys, it's you know, if we look at the numbers of what the SBC is producing and what our ballparks are doing, they're all negative numbers. So we hear over and over and over that our pool is not sustainable. It does not pay for itself. That's okay, but you know what? Quality of life for our residents is something that we should be proud of. So this is probably the last time I'm gonna ask today for it, but give me something so we can have a little bit of hope and go forward with the drawing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Pennell. I seen Councilor Hicks's hand, I think, was up.
Through your worship. So when I was asked about a pool when I was running, this is anecdotal, of course, but how do you feel, Angela, about the town having a pool? And my response has always been looking at what we have now, looking at the fact that we make $0. We're not even revenue neutral, if I'm not mistaken, on the SPC or close to it. To build a swimming pool, even a basic swimming pool, not an aquatics center with all the bells and whistles, the insurance, the staffing. I don't think it is sustainable when we have two facilities on either side of us. I think we are further ahead to arrange for transportation. That, I'm sorry, Dave, I know you have invested years, blood, sweat, and tears into this, but I don't see how it is, I don't see how it would be sustainable. People will say, oh, I'd love to go swimming, but they won't. It's not like the old days when you could hop on your bike and ride to the Rotary Park. If the logical place is at the SPC, your kid would probably get hit by 3 cars and run over backwards before they even made it there, the way the traffic is. There's no bike lanes, there's no sidewalks. You're still gonna have to give transportation to get there. If I can't see $75,000 this year, but perhaps we could, if you want to do something, maybe put some money into a reserve, and in 3 years. I mean, every day I see people juggling money standing at the till, waiting to pay for their groceries. They're transferring money on their phone because, oh, a bill came out. People can't afford it. They can't afford a pool. And I'm not talking about building the pool. You can fundraise and grant. It's what comes afterwards. I don't think it's sustainable or affordable right now.
Thanks, Councilor Hicks. Is there any, Deputy Mayor Cower?
Dave, as you know, a pool is very near and dear to my heart. Has been. We grew up there as kids. We also have a really not a happy situation here financially. Have we got a cost, what it's going to cost for these drawings, or did 75,000 just come out? Like, where did you come up with that money, that ask?
To Deputy Calver, the $75,000 came from talking to professionals in the business, and we have since talked to others, which is hard to get into a conversation with them because we don't have anything to back this up, that there could be, that number could be less. But we don't know until we go out and we start physically, seriously looking at this. Therefore, that's the reason why I'm kind of okay with a lower value. But we need to start something. And you know, Deputy Mayor and Councillor Hicks, we grew up in this pool down here. I was on the swim team. I can pull out my ribbons and tell you that you do get a ribbon for finishing in 7th. I have them, right? So, I mean, we had it. We grew up great here, and just because we're older now, there's young, and here I said I wasn't going to talk about this anymore, but there's young people here that would utilize it. There's elderly people here that would utilize it. And to simply just say that we can't afford it without really doing our due diligence is it behooves me. It really does.
Thank you, Councilor Pennell. Is there, sorry, Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, Councillor Pennell, you know that I have always been in favor of a pool, but you're going to say I'm insincere in that because I'm not in favor of spending $75,000 this year for drawings when we've had a request from our fire chief for 4 firefighters this year. Our fleet is aging and we need so much more things done than drawings for the pool. I'd love to have a pool. We had 2 pools 20 years ago. So nobody can tell me there's not a need for 1 pool now. And I think if it's built in conjunction with the SPC, it's going to be used and used well. But I just can't justify in good conscience spending $75,000 this year on that drawing. And like I say, I know you're going to say I'm insincere, but that's the way I feel about it right now.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Is Councillor Shank?
This is the last thing I'll say. I just go by what our accountants have told, our treasury department has told us, that with the waste management or with the sewage plant, the amount of debentures that we're going to have to take over there. So there's going to be major implications there that we're going to have to finance. We didn't finance East Street. Cal came at they bought 99 advance for $5 million. That hasn't have a dollar debentured against that one yet. You've got so many bills. Your reserves have been depleted. All right. So I could wish on a lot of things. I wish we had a lot of money. All right. But since we do not have the revenue, we have to increase our revenue and decrease our expenses somehow. And one of the first things, you saw what the salaries were. All right. The other thing is the services. So I cannot increase our service level when I know that we have major debt load coming down the pipe, because people can only afford so many taxes. You're right now at 6.71 plus another $200 for the bag tax. All right. So you figure out what that's going to hit. And that's based on the medium of 218,000 assessment. But I mean, the average house probably in Napanee is 450,000. But all I'm saying is what that cost's going to be. Whew.
Thank you, Councillor Shank. Is there anything else? And if there isn't, we would entertain a motion with respect to the ask of the Aquatics Committee. Seeing nothing, I think staff is looking for some direction here. Do we have someone that would like to put a motion on the floor?
I move the motion that we do not pay or use the $75,000 this year. All right. Until there we go.
We have a motion from Councillor Shank. Is there a seconder? Deputy Mayor Calver. Is there any further comments, questions, or concerns with respect to the motion that's on the floor? Yep, go ahead, Councillor Shank.
I hate to belabor this, but this is not a slight against Councillor Pennell or the team that they've been working at. I'm just looking at it, standing back and looking at our financial position. All right. I kudos to them that have done so much work and have grabbed this. I would love nothing better to do it. Whether you can go ahead and have a swim program down at Sandhurst, or not Sandhurst, but in a Doublestown Park that they used to have it, at Brooks Ferry Landing, they used to have it. And like what you said, I think their guidance, the council should be saying is, hey, all right, we need to, what can we do for a summer program, all right, for swimming lessons like we used to do years ago for kids in certain areas, all right? Whether they're bused there, whether they're not bused there, or what we can do, what we can't do. I think that's the guidance we should give that organization to look at. What can we do? What can we financially deal with? Because that's the way a lot of the kids in our neck of the woods learned how to swim also. And I did swim the Rotary Park pool also, even though I was from the outside. But all I'm saying is it was well intended, but maybe we should look at that scenario also. Give them that guidance to say, hey, look at that, and to have some type of program.
Yeah, and I think the timing, Madam Clerk can correct me, but at some point we're going to assess or address the mandates of our committees. I think that's on our calendar to do in the not too distant future.
Through your worship, that's correct. The committee appointments all were made in March of last year. So with the 1 year anniversary of that appointment coming up, that is going to be a report coming to council within the next few meetings.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Is there anything else? If not, we'll call the question with respect to the motion that's on the floor. Seeing none, all in favor of the motion that's on the floor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Next note that I have is with respect to the arts and culture ask of $5,000. Can you guide me with which page that is?
Through your worship, we're still on that slide. It's slide 26.
Perfect. It's easy to find. Who wants to start with respect to this ask? And I think the ask was $10,000, but I think we had it whittled down to $5,000 and had a good conversation on it. Who wants to, Councillor Norrie?
I'll just move the 5,000. No more. Thank you.
We have a motion on the floor to authorize the $5,000 to the Arts and Culture Committee. And do you have what you need with respect to that, Madam Clerk? Do we have a seconder? Deputy Mayor Calver. Is there any further comments, questions, or concerns with respect to the motion that's on the floor? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Next I have is supplemental to bylaw enforcement.
This budget is in slide 29.
I believe that the supplemental enforcement contract of $60,000 was the discussion, and I don't think that was included in recommendation 1. Am I correct with that?
You are correct. So the $60,000 for the supplemental enforcement is not included in the draft budget as presented. If it was to be added back in, the impact is 0.32% on the average residential tax rate.
Okay, folks, Councillor Norrie.
I know there's been problems that way, but I think while we're saying no to other essential services, I think at this time, it just can't add to the budget, as Mike says. It's just getting too much. So we'll have to make do with what we have right now.
And you're making that by way of motion? Okay, conversation. Is there any other conversation? Councillor Shank is going to move that by motion. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Norrie. Is there any further comments, questions, or concerns, or do we want to have any conversation with respect to this ask? Councillor Shank.
The only reason why I'm saying no at this time is because you're going to be hiring a new CAO here, probably, midsummer or whatever that might come out to be. All right. So there's going to be a reorganization within the municipality itself, because every new CAO will want to tweak this or tweak that and find out efficiencies or wherever. So therefore, there might be, a surplus in one area and it might be able to be fulfilled within. So that's the reason why I'm saying at this present time, because the $60,000 is another, then that would kick us over 7%. All right, I say no.
Thank you, Councillor Shank. Is there any other discussions? Deputy Mayor Cower.
Yeah, I'm just the opposite, Mike. I think we can't not have this, and we did discuss, that number of 60,000 can be adjusted on how many hours or not, but our current bylaw is overworked. Like, there's stuff that was reported a year ago that hasn't had nothing. She just doesn't have the time. She's one person. And unfortunately, it takes a long time to do the investigations, do the follow-ups, so on and so forth. And, I fully believe she's overworked, but I would be in favor of this. And like we talked earlier, we can adjust the 60,000 just based on how many hours we're going to do with a secondary bylaw, but that's just my opinion.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Calver. Is there any other conversation before we call the vote with respect to the motion that's on the floor? The motion is not to authorize the supplemental enforcement contract of $60,000. I think I'm correct there, Annie. That's the motion that's on the floor. If there's no further discussion, we'll call for the vote. All in favor of that motion? Opposed? And it would appear, Madam Clerk, that I have to vote. And I'm going to suggest, I'm going to agree with the Deputy Mayor on this and the fact that I do believe we need to get some help with respect to our enforcement. And we still do have control of it. All we're doing is authorizing up to a maximum of 60,000. And if we find that we don't use that, then we don't have to get to that. But it's, I mean, of all the things we get calls on during our days, it has to do with bylaw enforcement. And I just don't think that you know, we've maybe asked too much of one person already, and I just don't think we can continue to do that. So do you have what you need, Madam Clerk?
Through your worship, so as it stands, that motion was defeated, so there is still no amount in the draft budget for bylaw, supplemental bylaw. A member could suggest a different amount to be added in by way of motion.
Is there anybody out there who would like to make a motion with respect to supplemental enforcement contract? That's not a motion that we've just heard. You're going to make a motion to add the supplemental enforcement contract, and is that number still going to be $60,000? Not to exceed 60. You'll make that by motion, Deputy Mayor Cower. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Hicks. Is there any further comments, questions, or concerns? All in favor of that motion? Opposed? And once again, I get to vote. I will support the motion, Madam Clerk. That is what I have on my list. Is there something I've missed? Sorry, go ahead, Councillor Shank.
Bay of Quinte for 30,000.
Oh, yes. Bay of Quinte contract. What slide is that on?
That is included in slide 32, 33. Well, yes, correct, 33.
Okay. Slide 32 and 33.
Your worship, if I can just add validating number to that, the true budget for that is $26,162.
Great, thanks, Alan. Who wants to start?
I'll get, if you, is that all right? So.
Yep, go ahead. Go ahead, Councillor.
Point is there's two separate items that we have to look at. I agree with what Councillor Hicks is saying about the short-term accommodations, but what the level we're doing and for the amount we're paying for what we're getting in return, it has never been proven to us that it was the best bang for the buck for $26,000. During a tight year the way it is, and right now you're setting at 7.14%, all right? You need to save some money, guys. And I know it's tough, but all I'm saying is for the Bay Quinte to advertise our community, all right, there's $26,000 you can save. I'm not, they're going to be more than compensated if we use them with the short-term accommodations when that comes through. But we can't just continually just go ahead and go a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. So that's why I'll make the motion that we do not spend the $26,100 for Bay Quinte this year.
Thank you, Councillor Shank. So we have a motion on the floor not to support that. Do we have a seconder? Deputy Mayor Calver. We'll open the floor up for further discussion. Councillor Pennell.
Thank you, Worship. One of the hardest things to measure is marketing. In my profession, my marketing plans are measured by my paycheck. It's very hard to reach out there and ask people, where did you hear from me? Because they're going to say on the radio and you're not on the radio or stuff like that. So it's very hard. So to sit here and take away the Bay of Quinte marketing, we would also have to then take a look at, I feel that we would also then have to take a look at our communications and what we're doing in-house. And I don't want to ruffle any feathers, but it's all the same. Like, on one side, we're saying that we can't afford it because we can't measure. I'm assuming we can't afford it because we can't measure the results of it. But that's the problem with marketing. And I think that when when you're on a program like this, it's a long-term commitment to see any benefits from it. And somebody that struggles with marketing every year and puts tens of thousands of dollars away in a budget to do it, I understand that sometimes you wake up in the morning and wonder what you're doing. But you need to be consistent, and as soon as you stop, you'll see the measurement when you stop. So I would recommend that we continue with the marketing plans that we have had in place.
Thank you, Councillor Pennell. Is there any other questions or comments? Councillor Shank.
The only reason why I was stating this is that we're spending $658,000 for economic development already. All right, we've got a new website up, great, you know what I mean? We're on the right direction now, guys. So all I'm saying is when you're spending $658,000 for the economic development, which is under economic development overview and within internal, and now I know it's not all advertising, but it's not like we're not spending any money towards that. We already got a well budget. So to put another 20 some odd $1,000 to have an external, maybe we can tweak what we have internal to do the same thing with our new website for what they're doing. You know what I mean? But maybe I'm not, maybe we can't do that, but all I'm saying is I got to cut somewhere.
Thanks, Councillor Shank. I see Annie coming up. She may have some information or some input with respect to our discussion.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to add a couple points to the comments. Currently, the 26,000 for Bay of Quinte is already within the budget. To be totally honest, staff cannot do what they're doing internally. Even if I were to turn around, if we were to get rid of Bay of Quinte and then I requested another 26,000 for internal marketing, we would not be able to do an eighth of what they're able to put out on a yearly basis. To follow up on, I think it was the December 19th council meeting, I do have the breakdown from Bay of Quinte of how they come up with their numbers. And a lot of it is around geofencing. So I'm happy to provide council with the breakdown of where those numbers came from. It is a lot to throw out right now that might give you more information on where those numbers were generated to help clear up some information that way.
And I was just going to add that, and it's not my idea because I can't take credit for it, but by authorizing the money in the budget doesn't necessarily mean we're authorizing the use of the Bay of Quinte marketing. That decision can be made subsequent to what we're doing tonight. I think what we're looking for tonight is do we want to put that money into basically the budget or the reserves with respect to marketing? And we can always have the discussion after as to how we spend that, if we want to spend that. Would I be correct there?
Through Your Worship, we would still be bringing a draft MOU forward to actually enter into an agreement with Bay of Quinte moving forward. This, yeah, we would just be looking for the dollars in the budget at this point.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Shank.
So in the light of the situation, I'll withdraw my motion until I have, because we've been always preaching, we cannot make an informed decision unless we have all the facts. So Annie, if you could give me all those facts of saying, okay, this is well dollars spent, and that I can do my research that it's not just bull numbers, that it's actual correct numbers, then hey, I'll eat my words. But we have to have all the facts in front of us for us to make a decision. So yeah, I'll just forget this and we'll get that. If you get that to us as quick as possible with everybody else, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you, Councillor Shank. Madam Clerk, how do we do this now legally?
Through Your Worship, if the mover and seconder are both willing to withdraw that motion, then that's fine. We can move on.
And my seconder is Deputy Mayor Calver from. Okay. So I think we've, and we will have time to bring this back, or do you still want a decision as to whether that money is going into the budget?
I can speak to that, Mayor, if that's okay. My recommendation would be that we draft a staff report that would form kind of the initial part of the next budget meeting, similar to what we did this morning with the special area levy. That would be my recommendation, and then we could either choose to include or exclude, or some combination thereof if there's additional budget requests, if there's another option if we don't go through Bay of Quinte.
Great, thanks. I think that makes all the sense in the world. Are we good then, I think, Madam Clerk? And I don't have anything else on my list. Is there anything that I've missed? Councillor Pennell?
Your worship, I'd like to make a motion that we add to the budget 2 full-time firefighters for this fiscal year. And I would also like to request a recorded vote on this.
We have a motion on the floor, and I think we can do that. Can we not, Madam Clerk?
Through your worship, would finance like a dollar number attached to that motion, or is that enough for you to build out a draft budget should the motion carry?
I can include that. I'm just not certain about providing the numbers at this moment. I do have calculations for the 4 full-time phased in. Do you require the dollar figures as part of the motion, I guess is my.
Through your worship, I don't. If you don't, just
I
wanted
don't.
to check in.
Okay.
So we do have a motion on the floor, do we, Madam Clerk? I'll let you get caught up.
So just to confirm, since this has been requested as a recorded vote, that the motion is that a funding allocation for 2 additional full-time firefighter positions be included in the 2024 budget.
We have a motion on the floor. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Martin. Is there any further comments, questions, or concerns with respect to the motion that's on the floor? Councillor Hicks.
Through you, your worship, and this question may be better directed to Chief Hammond. If I recall, and I'm sorry I couldn't find it, I was looking for it, your initial request back in 2023 was for 4 full-time firefighters, one of whom would also have a designation or a classification of being a mechanic or a service technician, and there was a difference in the salary because they had the additional skill set. Am I right or wrong? And what was the difference in the dollar value?
You're correct. We had requested 3 suppression staff and 1 suppression staff that was a mechanic. There is no value added difference in either of those positions. Thank you, through your worship.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions or comments with respect to the motion that's on the floor? And I believe, Madam Clerk, we've asked for there's been a request for a recorded vote, so I will hand it over to you because I see no other questions, comments, or concerns.
Ward 1, Councillor Shank. Ward 2, Councillor Hicks. Ward 3, Councillor Pennell.
Yes.
Ward 4, Councillor Norrie.
Yes.
Ward 5, Councillor Martin.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Calver.
No.
Mayor Richardson.
No.
Motion is defeated.
Is there anything else? We've got all night. Councillor Pennell, do you have something else you would like to put on the floor?
I'd like to make a motion that we add 1 full-time firefighter to this budget.
Council, we do have a motion. Mover with a motion on the floor. Do we have a seconder? I'll ask again, do we have a seconder for the motion that's on the floor? Councillor Martin. Is there any further comments, questions, or concerns with respect to Councillor Martin?
I just want to ask the chief, does 1 firefighter do any good?
Of course, 1 full-time firefighter would assist us. and keeping the community safe.
Thank you, Chief.
Is there any, Counselor Shank?
So basically what you're saying, for the people that vote want to have one or whatever, that any of the other factual information you don't really care about. So until you have the facts in front of you, because I could throw torpedoes out here and make it a bloodbath like you've never seen before. But all I'm saying is wait until you have the facts so you can make an informed decision. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying no to any firefighters. I'm not saying yes to any. I just want to know the facts in front of me first. That's all.
Thank you. Counselor Martin?
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, is there any way we can have a resolution to hire one firefighter and have a provision to add to that once we get the information that Councillor Shank is referring to?
I'm not sure I'm the one that can answer that question, but we do have a motion that's on the floor. And I think probably what we should do is vote on it unless somebody can provide the answers to Mr. Counselor Martin's request. And we do have a request for a recorded vote. Counselor Pennell.
Thank you, Worship. Through you, I just want to make a comment about what Councillor Shank said, is that the proof is that we have 1,600 draft-approved homes, many different subdivisions from one side of the town to the other. We have the lawn care, 2 lawn care facilities being done. A factory that's going to double in size and hire 200 more people. Whether those 200 people are already residents of Napanee or they're going to move to Napanee. I think the growth speaks for itself. I feel that the ask for 4 was a little heavy for our budget. But whatever we do from today going forward is going to help out at the end of the day. If we could get 1, it's better than none. And that's what I'm asking for in this vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Pennell. Counselor Shank.
So all the reports that are going to be forthcoming are going to show all that. If you want to have an idea of what those reports would look like, I've been to Prince Edward County. I've looked at their crisis, basically what the incidents and what they've done, what they haven't done. But all I'm saying is that until that will show you in all the growth, where there's deficiencies, where there's underserviced areas, where there's more serviced areas, where are we falling in between that? Where are the gaps? How many people do we need? How many people don't need? How many medical calls we're going to? How many calls that is a waste of time? You know what I mean? Where can our money being spent the best? All right? Because if you take the medical calls out of the equation, you're down to 400 calls, guys. Then you take the false alarms out, take everything else out, you might be 1 call a day. So you're going to pay somebody how much to go on 1 call a day? So all I'm telling you, I'm not sure what it works out and what the numbers work out at, but until that is all presented to me, then I'm making an informed decision about what they want. I'm not going by emotion. I'm not going, oh, the world's coming to an end. All right. You've got 45 experienced, or I don't know how experienced now that I've been out of it, but you have some senior, well-experienced paid on-call volunteers that have more experience than any of your professional firefighters got. So all I'm saying is use everything in perspective. So there's a lot of things that we don't know, and until we have those facts, then you can make an informed decision.
Thank you, Counselor Shank. Is there any other comments or questions? And I do believe we have a motion on the floor, and we've got a request for a recorded vote. If there's nothing else, I'll allow Madam Clerk to do the recorded vote. Sorry.
Through your worship, the motion on the floor is that a funding allocation for the addition of 1 full-time firefighter position be included in the 2024 budget.
You good there, Counselor Hicks? Okay, if there's nothing else, Madam Clerk, it's up to you now.
Ward 1, Councillor Shank. Ward 2, Councillor Hicks. Ward 3, Councillor Pennell.
Sorry, could we have Hicks please use their mic for that vote, please?
No.
No.
Ward 3, Counselor Pennell.
Yes.
Ward 4, Counselor Nori.
Yes.
Ward 5, Counselor Martin.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Calver.
No.
Mayor Richardson.
No.
That motion is defeated.
I think we're getting near the end unless somebody else wants to make another motion with respect to this evening's budget. Seeing none, we've got a recommendation that council receive for information the updated 2024 draft operating and capital budget presentation, and further that council direct staff present the amended draft and capital budget to the next special meeting of February 20th based on the direction provided at this meeting. Moved by Deputy Mayor Culver, seconded by Councillor Hicks. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. And we'll look for a motion to confirm the proceedings through a bylaw. Moved by Councillor Pennell, seconded by Councillor Martin. Bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation Town of Greater Napanee at its special session of council held February 6, 2024, read a first, second, and finally passed this 6th day of February 2024. All in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Look for a motion for adjournment. Moved by Councillor Pennell, seconded by Councillor Hicks. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thanks, folks. It's been an extremely long day, and we'll see you next week at a regular session of council.